And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, yeah.
Attention to roll call.
That's right. Good morning, everybody. 8:05 live Eastern time. And of course, it's Wednesday, halfway through the week, hump day with the finest Unfiltered. So Sal Greco show was on yesterday on the Sal Greco show on his own YouTube channel. We wish Sal the best. We still have a great relationship. We are friends with Sal. Just wanted to debunk some of the rumors. As far as the network, we're just going different ways, different visions, and different missions. But we wish Sal nothing but the best. And if you're a viewer, a fan, a friend, a supporter, a hater, stick with, please still continue to watch Sal's show. We support him. And listen, sometimes this happens, right? Sometimes this happens. And friendships and business, I guess you could say, sometimes have to have some type of dichotomy to it. So with that being said, let's continue. There's a lot of content, of course, in New York City, NYPD, and the entire country. Let's talk about Jessica Tisch as the police commissioner of New York City Police Department, while Zohran Mamdani is now the mayor. There's been some conversation whether there has been a change of communication as far as the hierarchy for the NYPD police commissioner in connection and communication with the mayor. So let's talk about that. John, let's just jump right into it. And what are your immediate thoughts on this?
So there's been some talk, has Jessica Tisch been promoted? That talk's coming out because the second executive order, not the executive order, but the second set of things that Zohran Mamdani put out on his first day in office basically said that the police commissioner will not direct report to him. It will direct report to a deputy mayor. With that, there was a flood of media. Jessica Tisch having such a control over the media could be a good thing for your administration when you're aligned, but it could be a terrible thing for your administration when you're not, right? Because she has the ability to control good stories and bad stories about you. So flood of media comes out. Jessica Tisch is demoted. Look what Zohran Mamdani's doing. He's taking away her authority. He doesn't even want to be briefed on the day-to-day of the New York City Police Department. Blah, 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 blah. And with that, they come out and he's like, no. That was a little mishap. The police commissioner is going to direct report to me still. I mean, what are your overall thoughts about that little back and forth? I thought it was super interesting, and I thought it showed that already there's a rift in that administration, and she's a problem for Zohran Mamdani. And again, I'm not a big supporter of her. I'm not a big supporter of him. But just looking, are they cohesive? Are they a team that's together? I think right there you saw they're absolutely not.
Well, I think, just as the language I always use, but I'm going to say I think I was spot on. I had said this months ago that I think Jessica Tisch will be there for the transition. It's definitely easy for Zohran Mamdani to have it for the transition, but I don't think she'll be there for long. I don't see that being a relationship or cohesiveness between the ideals of Jessica Tisch, police commissioner, and also Zohran Mamdani. I mean, do I think that Jessica Tisch is the ultimate crime fighter? Absolutely not. And do I think Zohran Mamdani is completely anti-crime? No. I think some of his ideals are just completely insane and off the cuff. But at the same token, I don't see how the two of them can commingle. So I just think she's there for the initial transformation, as you could say, from Zohran Mamdani taking office after Eric Adams. I don't think she'll be there very long. I think I don't know, but my assumption is there's a lot of work behind the scenes right now and getting someone to replace her. And I think that also, by her body language I've watched, I think that she's pretty much has one foot out the door. Just like we used to say in the Marine Corps, she's on the bus. I think she's on the bus. I think she's ready to go. And I think clearly you can see that they're not trying to build a rapport or relationship together. But I do believe that rumors come from somewhere, right? I don't think that all rumors are true, but sometimes, especially when it comes to politics at this level, the rumors come from somewhere. But we've watched the body language and when they've held press conferences so far, and just like when we saw Tom Donlin, when he was the interim police commissioner, we spoke about the body language and and the appearance of the dais and the different hierarchy of the NYPD upper echelon. And you can see the language by where people stand and how they look at each other. And you already see right now, it's not too good.
Well, I think it always was a marriage of convenience, like the whole thing. You know what I mean? I think it was like they both could benefit each other, right? They could both take some bad media off of each other. But I agree. I don't know that she'll be out immediately, but in my opinion, I believe she's going to be Kathy Hochul's running mate. I could be dead wrong about that. I just see a lot of back and forth with her and the governor, and that's what I think. I think ultimately that was always the plan. You're going to stick around for the first few months. We're going to bring in Issa Abbasi, and you're going to be Kathy Hochul's running mate. Let's just do this. Let's keep the media going down, because you could see yesterday at her press conference, she was not her same usual confident, composed self. She's always in charge, and she's always very particular. About how where people are placed, where they're standing, who's saying what, when they're saying it. But for the first time, I think I've seen her extremely nervous. She kept her throat kept having a problem, like she kept needing water. And I was like, wow, she is not comfortable up there. Like she's having like a real anxiety up there. And there's a lot because of it. There was a press conference yesterday, and they were speaking about the crime data. It was the first press conference of the NYPD by 2026, and she's standing there with both Hochul and Mamdani. And we know that there was supposed to be a pretty big article that was going to come out this weekend about the crime numbers, and former councilman Bob Holden out the door started questioning the crime numbers. He's been questioning for a while, and he asked for basically, how does the NYPD audit? How do they audit the NYPD crime numbers? What's the procedure? Now I know that, just from my knowledge in the NYPD, I know that crime data is audited by Quality Assurance Division, right? Quality Assurance Division does these random sampling audits. They do it in every precinct. They did it, I think they used to do it quarterly, and now maybe they do it biannually. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Either biannually or quarterly, they come around to each precinct and they do a random small sampling of 61s, which are complaint reports. And what happens is those complaint reports, when they're audited months later, they find numerous discrepancies. And, sometimes they find a downgrade, but the overwhelming majority of things that they find are complaints need to be upgraded to felonies, meaning that the crime statistics that were put out for the end of the year are not accurate. They're not the final numbers for the end of the year. They're like, oh, crime's down, this, that, the other thing. But now just think, they're only doing a small random sampling in each precinct. They're not doing this huge audit. And even if they find heavy discrepancies in one command, I don't know that they do a full audit at that point. I never worked in there. I knew a few people that worked in there. And again, I haven't been in the police department in 3 years, so I don't know how the inner workings of that are happening today. But I know that's what they were doing in the past. And so Bob Holden asked for that data. That's it. That's all he asked for. He asked for what is that audit? How often is it done? Did you find? What are the results of those audits that you found over the last 4 years? And I don't believe that data is going to get given. And there was an article that, it looks like got squashed. It looks like the NYPD. And I think this is the third or fourth time I've been aware of articles, not that we pushed in the media, but that the media was calling us on, and they're gone. They're just not there. And so, I think that had a lot to do with her being uncomfortable up on that stage as well. But overall, what do you think? Do you think that she was actually demoted?
No, not at all. Not at all. I don't think she was demoted at all. I think I don't think anything has changed at this point. I think that's a lot of rumor, but I do think it does foreshadow that I would say she's pretty much like the show 90 Day Fiance. And I said this a while back, I give it 3 months. I say 90 days and she's out. I mean, we just had the press conference with Zohran Mamdani, Kathy Hochul, and Jessica Tisch talking about crime numbers. And I think that you could see, Kathy Hochul was pretty much saying that she and Jessica Tisch share the same goals, so and the same mission. So I think that there's a lot of foreshadowing in Jessica Tisch actually going up to the governor's office. I mean, we spoke about that within the past year. Actually, I think in the past 2 years, even before she was police commissioner, we spoke about her being potentially part of the New York City economic and political wheel. Do I think that these questions foreshadow and actually show a good representation of what's been happening in the past and how things are getting documented with crime? Absolutely. So I'm a firm believer that in many cases, we ask questions that we already know the answers to. And so what I mean by that, I think Bob Holden asking these questions is a reflection that we all have our own perception versus reality, and the perception that we have of New York City is the reality. That's why I say we heard from the Eric Adams administration, perception versus reality. Perception is reality. And our perception is that the crime numbers, and I say the majority of people with common sense that have their eyes open can see that the crime numbers that they're reporting, and when I say the NYPD, along with Jessica Tisch, especially at the helm of Jessica Tisch, does not reflect what they see on the streets. And I often say this, right? The best indicators of crime is Central Park and Times Square. Look at Central Park and Times Square, especially with a centric focus on Times Square. The amount of violent crime that we have seen there in comparison to predecessors of administrations, it's astronomical. So it's not just happening, you want to say in the hood or the ghettos. It's happening in Times Square, a place where we have tourism, a place where we have specific units to concentrate on Times Square to prevent crime, because that is the economic center of the entire world. So I think there's a lot of foreshadowing going on here. I say 90-day fiance. I think she's out in 90 days. There's no doubt about it. I think they're on the hunt right now of who's going to be the police commissioner. I'm sure they probably already know this. Maybe it's a Abbasi as the front runner, but I'm sure we'll see that come pretty soon. Who's going to be the police commissioner? And I think she hasn't been demoted, but I think it's a lot of subliminal messaging right now that there's no relationship there, and he's going to find someone that is going to be tight. And I do envision it will be someone from the Muslim community.
Yeah, fair enough. I think nepotism will reign on. I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. So, I think that, I think we should definitely expect that again. I think that's my favorite right now. She's Kathy Hochul's running mate, and Issa Abbasi is going to be the police commissioner. That's what I think. I mean, I have no inside information that that's the case. I just everything I'm seeing. So these are the crime numbers that Reza Chowdhury has just put up. He updated his New York City violent crime 2005 to 2025. Now, we're touting crime is down, but if you see, it's just a slight 4% violent crimes down by. But again, those numbers are not accurate. Even these numbers in the years past are not accurate, because the other thing about these audits that people need to know and people need to be aware of is that these audits, like once they're conducted, you remember that article, the Post article that came out 2 years ago, and they're like, oh, we went through the upgrades, and then after we looked at the upgrades, crime actually wasn't down, crime was actually up. Do you remember that?
And that was random. That's the best part. That was a random audit.
But that's what they do. Like that's what the police department does. These are the audits that I'm talking about. They just do random sampling audits. They don't go through heavy things. They just grab whatever. I don't know how they determine what they're grabbing and what they're not, but they do this. But when they do that audit, do you think those CompStat sheets get updated backwards?
Oh, absolutely not. I know.
Absolutely
I was there.
not.
I went to CompStat often. It doesn't happen.
And the reason we know that is because after that article, that CompStat sheet didn't get updated. It still showed that crime was down. If you look at it today, it still shows crime was down for that year, when we know it actually wasn't. And so like that's how we know, like, they're not going backwards and updating that crime sheet. So in here, the numbers that are rising are actually much higher because there's never been that audit conducted. The audit's conducted, but the numbers never reflect the audit, right? And the audit is only small random samplings. So they're showing this slight decrease, but after the audits are conducted, I bet you there was actually an increase. Not that Reza's chart won't reflect it, And either will the NYPD's chart reflect it, because the numbers never get updated. So and I think that's something that needs to be made public and people should start calling for, because the thing is this, look, I'm not picking on the NYPD. I'm not. It's like you're in a very high position. With great power comes great responsibility. You talk about transparency. We're watching insane things. Eric's talking about it right now, the barometer for crime in New York City, Central Park and Times Square. We've had a woman get stabbed in the back changing her diapers in a carriage in Times Square. We had a man bending down to tie his shoes get stabbed in the back. This is all in the last 2 weeks. I mean, this, like, you can't sit there and be like, oh yeah, it's the safest big city in the world, and it's not. And so the thing is, the tricks that are being played here, could you imagine what's going on nationwide in cities that don't have the level of scrutiny that the NYPD has? I mean, like, if the NYPD is doing it, God only knows what Chicago, Washington, D.C., L.A., Seattle, all these little mom and pop small towns are doing when it comes to the crime numbers. So we don't even know what their actual crime is in America. Never mind in New York City. So we don't know the crime trends. The FBI statistics are all thrown off as a result of this. And if they have no integrity in reporting crime, why should we trust our police departments with anything else? Right? I thought integrity was a non-negotiable in policing. And apparently we could pick and choose what we want to be honest about and what we don't. And so, like, this is a pure example of, even if these numbers were accurate, which I don't believe that they are. I don't believe they are, because if they were, you would have no problem making it publicly available, those audits, and you would have no problem going backwards and updating those CompStat sheets. Wouldn't be an issue, right? Because you're like, hey, it is what it is, right? That's the old saying. This is what it is. This is what we have to tackle. This is what we have to deal with. So, but like, how do we actually go ahead and fight crime when we don't actually know the numbers? What is the actual barometer for crime? What are we dealing with? What are the criminal patterns that the NYPD is facing, law enforcement's facing, the nation's facing, when you're getting up on TV and you're lying to everybody's face and you're uncomfortable doing it? And it's clear as day. I mean, it's gross. I mean, even listening, we're going to go through that whole press conference, even listening to Hochul pretend that bail reform's no longer a thing. They fixed it and everybody's safe now. Everything's good. The trains are down, crime's down. They're amazing. It was like a whole pat us on the back session, and it was gross.
Well, I also think that many of the police departments throughout this country have taken advantage of, and I do believe it's the NYPD also, have taken advantage of the change in how law enforcement agencies in this country report their crime to the FBI, right? So the older system is the Uniform Crime Reporting System, right? That's how the NYPD, along with other law enforcement agencies throughout the country, report their crime to the FBI. And it was pretty much an aggregated system based on just on numbers. And then they went to the National Incident-Based Reporting System, which actually they have to report, but they have to actually report who the victims are, who, what, where, when, why. So it's a different reporting system. And a good majority, because I've done my research on this, a good majority of law enforcement agencies, and no coincidence about it, in blue cities are claiming that they have had failure in adapting to the new system to report their crime. So there's a lag right now. So the FBI is not getting accurate information. And I believe they're utilizing this change here to skate the system and to mask what's going on. Well, we could just report it later because there's a problem with the system. So that's how, in my opinion, based on what I've read, my observation, that's how a lot of these law enforcement agencies, including the NYPD, are skating away with actually failing to report proper crime because of the change in the reporting systems, because they went from an older system to a modern system. So there's a lot of information that you have to put in this transition in the reporting system. It's not getting documented as far as who, what, where, when, why, and all this information because of the change. Stephen S. says it here. Yep, demon right. You're actually right. Because the Democrats want to hide crime. And you see, it's predominantly happening in blue cities that they're not reporting crime accurately. It's not just the NYPD. You're right. It's throughout the entire country. But the NYPD has such a focus on it. It's always being criticized because it's the largest police department in the entire world. So we see it more prevalent than ever. But as I said earlier, your eyes are not playing tricks on you. What you're seeing is crime in real time, right? You're seeing incidents. I mean, we're not talking about shoplifting or pickpockets. We're talking about some violent crime going on in Times Square. And I think Times Square, again, I said Times Square, Central Park, are really two important pivotal points in New York City to focus on crime. You can see when crime is doing well, those are two key spots just to look at. If it's bad, look at those two spots.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they're tourist hubs. So, like, how do you want tourists to feel when they come to your city? You want them to feel safe. You want them to feel happy. You want them to go out and spend money. You don't want them to feel like, where the hell are we? And I'm never coming back here. And unfortunately, I heard it time and time again. I had an airport transportation company where I was driving people back and forth to the airport, and that's all people were saying, right? Like, that's all they were reporting. Oh yeah, no, I went there. Yeah, I went there with my grandson, and we both got stuck up and got our Rolexes robbed. I'm like, what? And like crazy things, like crazy stories. And it's things that we hadn't experienced from like the very early 2000s on until like really de Blasio came back into like 2017, 2018. But even at that point, if you look at New York City overall crime numbers, crime was actually at its lowest point with de Blasio. But we saw the turn in the disrespect for officers, the no more fear of prosecution. So it took a few years to set in to where the crime really started to explode. And that happens in 2019, 2020. And that's why you consistently hear, and you'll consistently hear through this press conference that we're going to go through, you're going to consistently hear minus the pandemic years. And the reason that they're doing that is because what they're doing is they're going back to the lowest point of crime, and they're removing how high crime actually was in those years. They're just like, yeah, forget about 2020 and 2021 and 2022. Let's just focus on now. Like, just forget. We're not going to talk about those years. And it's really all it is it's crime stat manipulation. We call it ComStat magic. That's what it is. And I think Mike Kemper really invented it, and I think it was a great job that he did, because people were buying it. I think only Dean Meminger caught him, and he's like, wait, what do you mean? Like, why are we taking those years out?
You remember that? That was great.
Yeah. He's like, no, because there was a respiratory virus going around. It's like, oh, okay, and
I tell you what, I like Mike Kemper. He's the only chief that we've actually dealt with, and we've actually been critical, that could take a joke. Many times he's hit me up on Instagram and wished me well and said thank you for the chuckles. I want to wish him a happy new year. But I always said if I had a car dealership, Michael Kemper would run it. He could sell anything. Listen, we don't need those years. And then the best part is the reason why the increase for assaults is because police officers are being assaulted at a 46% rate. So let's blame the police officers. He did a hell of a job, and don't look anybody in the eye.
Yeah, and so the other thing is, right, like, they're talking about that Tisch isn't direct reporting to him. So, like, what the Eric Adams administration exposed is that police commissioners really don't run the New York City Police Department. The mayors do. So it really is irrelevant whether there's a direct report to the mayor or not, because I personally don't believe any of Eric Adams' police commissioners were direct reporting to him every morning. I think it was Kaz Daughtry. I think Kaz Daughtry was telling him what he's going to do, what they're going to do, and what they're not going to do. And then he was calling the police commissioner. And you saw the rift between Tisch and him when she came in, right? Obviously, they didn't keep him on as a deputy mayor. They're like, no, you're going back down to detective, So that hasn't been happening in a while. The other thing that really that's in the news before we get to this press conference is that Zohran Mamdani doesn't have federal security clearance. Everyone's freaking out. So I'm like, well, how is that different from the Eric Adams administration? Because under Eric Adams, not only did the mayor not have federal security clearance, his top NYPD officials also did not have federal security clearance, because of all of the corruption scandals that were coming out. They're like, we can't trust these people. We have allegations that taking money from foreign governments. We have proof that they're taking money from foreign governments. We have proof that there are things going on with these contracts. We can't give them valuable federal intelligence. And so, Eric Adams used to like to say that he was the pilot of the plane and don't hope for the plane to crash. But Eric Adams flew the plane of New York City blindfolded for about 3 years. And as much as everyone cheered him on, I mean, I'm looking at the same thing happen with Zohran Mamdani being in office for 4 days and 5 days. I think we're at day 7 now, and he doesn't have federal security clearance. And I'm like, well, it's true. It's concerning. Where have you been the last 3 years? Like, why are you concerned now? Why weren't you concerned 3 years ago? And that's why I was calling for the removal of Eric Adams. He should have been removed from office from Kathy Hochul, and he wasn't. And so the system that's in place with him is still in place today. And honestly, when there are questions about a mayor, they shouldn't have federal security clearance. When there are questions about a police department, they shouldn't have federal security clearance. But at the same point, they also shouldn't be occupying that seat, and they shouldn't be occupying those seats. And what we've seen is that, like, we've just accepted failure, and we've allowed people without integrity and that have been ripe with corruption to continue and go on, even people that have been indicted, to stay in their position and make vital decisions around a multi-billion-dollar economy like New York City. Scary, man. Very scary.
Yeah, I think it's so indicative. What it tells us is that the police commissioner for the NYPD has been pretty much a figurehead. There's no doubt about it that the mayor, in fact, is the police commissioner in any facet that they want. And I think it also is another indication, what we've been saying, is that Eric Adams' administration is no different from what you're seeing right now. Everyone's talking about what's going to happen when Zohran Mamdani is the mayor. We're 7 days in. What has really changed in comparison to Eric Adams' administration? Just as we told you during election time, a vote for Eric Adams was a vote for Zohran Mamdani. A vote for Zohran Mamdani was a vote for Andrew Cuomo. It was a hat trick. All three of them were the same, right? We talked about three-card Mamdani. That's exactly what it is. You're seeing the exact same template right now. Eric Adams didn't have security clearance. No, neither did Zohran Mamdani. Eric Adams couldn't be trusted. And at this point, well, if he doesn't have security clearance, maybe he can't be trusted either. But we're only 7 days in. And I think that ultimately the mayor is the police commissioner. I mean, part of their major platform in running for mayor in New York City is public safety. They're telling you their public safety plan. They're not telling you think about that. When you vote for mayor, the mayor doesn't tell you, well, I'm going to hire the police commissioner that is going to give me the best public safety plan. They tell you what their public safety plan is. So ultimately, the mayor of New York City, in my opinion, is the de facto police commissioner, and the police commissioners are much more of just a figurehead, especially in the latter years that we've seen in comparison to Ray Kelly in that dynamic with Bloomberg. You see a huge comparison. Stephen S., great comments today, says it, three-card scamdani. Yeah, this is a major scam. Now, is it important for the police commissioner to be briefed and for the police commissioner to brief the mayor? Absolutely, right? There has to be a level of communication, and lines of communication have to be open, especially when it comes to policing and public safety. But I just think that I give it 90 days. I don't think Jessica Tisch is going to be here long before we have a new police commissioner. And I don't think any of the dynamics are going to change. What I am curious about is how we are going to report crime. Because if Zohran Mamdani reports crime accurately, we're going to see a major increase in crime. And I don't think the appearance is going to be any different. You're going to say, wow, it smells, looks, sounds the same as it did before. If you're walking those streets in New York City, than it did before. Because obviously crime numbers are a complete lie, and you're being gaslit. Those crime numbers, how can you see all this crime going on in Times Square, major violent crime, and at the same time, they're telling you that crime is at an all-time low? How can crime be at an all-time low when some of the most violent neighborhoods are still having the same crime they had before Eric Adams' administration, or worse? And then in addition to that, in areas that we've seen a major decline, a place where the tourists can enjoy, spend money, have become havens for crime. You don't need crime numbers. Your eyes can tell you exactly what the story is.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get into this press conference. We're gonna take breaks in between and talk about what Tisch is talking about, Mamdani, and then get on to the questions. So, all right, try not to fall asleep, guys. Nah, we'll keep stopping it early and often. So let's get into this because
I love bedtime stories.
There's 3 people already on the stage that have no business talking about public safety. One happens to be the NYPD police commissioner. The other happens to be the governor of New York, and the other one happens to be the mayor of New York City. So that's the first my first observation. So let's go.
That's not a problem, right, John?
Nah, you don't need police experience to run the police department or. Stop. It's always been done, Eric. You're just a sexist.
Big turnout. All right. Good morning, everyone. 2025 was a historic year for the NYPD and for the city of New York. Shooting incidents and shooting victims fell to their lowest levels in recorded history. The subway system this year outside the pandemic era since 2009.
Let's just stop right there. Sorry, I don't mean to stop it early, but like, do you believe that shooting incidents are at historic lows?
Are we joking? Come on. No way. Listen, of course they're at a historic low when you don't document them, right? I guess it's that old story, right? If a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, did it fall? I mean, listen, we've seen it. We've seen not only is it, in my opinion, they're not being documented, but they're also being misclassified and misrepresented. And you could ask yourself, do we have any evidence of that? We all have the evidence of that, particularly with the reported shooting in Staten Island where shots were fired at a home and it was not classified as investigate shots fired or attempted assault or a felony assault. And rather, it was documented as, I believe, reckless endangerment. So we see a misclassification, misrepresentation of crime. And also, my opinion, especially with the removal and the lack of maintenance to these shot spotters, lack of documentation. So we're not getting the full picture. So right here, this conversation starts out in 2 seconds in, we already see the outright lie.
Exactly. And so the thing is, like, the only shootings they're talking about is when somebody gets hit. And honestly, there's so much evidence that they're not documenting when shots are fired at someone with the intent to kill them or injure them. They're not documented at all. All you have to do is go over to NYPD Crime Stoppers, and they'll show you video after video of males clearly shooting a firearm at somebody, usually sideways. They're usually shooting like this. And it'll be like, yeah, does anyone know this male? They're wanted for reckless endangerment. So right there, that is not getting classified as a shooting and into the NYPD crime statistics. So, I mean, it's clear as day. It's not just that male on Staten Island. It's any time somebody's not getting hit, they don't consider it a shooting. Like a legal firearm could have went off. 80 bullets could have got fired that night. Doesn't matter. 100 bullets could have got fired that night. Doesn't matter. And then for every shooting, you also got to say how many shots were actually fired and how many people were targets of that shooting. Because if there were multiple targets, there should be multiple shootings, right? But they're only going to be one, right? Only the person that got hit. So what New York City is celebrating isn't history. They're celebrating bad aim.
Transit robberies fell to their lowest point ever, even when you include the pandemic era, and retail theft was down a whopping 14%. Together, these numbers describe an agency that is firing on all cylinders, driven by the extraordinary work of the men and women of the NYPD. I want to be clear. These are not incremental gains. They are historic outcomes. Before I get into the data, I want to thank Governor Hochul for being here with us today. Her presence is a symbol of the true partner that she has been to this department, committed to the mission, supportive of the cops, and focused on the results. When federal funding for our counterterrorism programs came under threat, she fought to protect it. She invested in public safety across the city, and those investments have helped produce so many of the 2025 results that we will cover today. I also want to thank Mayor Mamdani, to whom I report directly, and with whom I am developing a close and productive working relationship. I look forward to working with him to continue to drive down crime in 2026.
So she throws shade on the whole that she doesn't direct report to him. But why do you why do you think that executive order came out? I don't think that was a mistake. Do you think that was a mistake?
No, exactly. Why would they have to administer an executive order if nothing actually transpired? There's no doubt about it. And I think also, again, we see foreshadowing that Jessica Tisch eventually is going to make a political move into the governor's office. It's interesting, right? If people look back how Jessica Tisch, like many other politicians, and I consider her a politician at this point, does one thing and says another. I mean, we saw that from Eric Adams often, but she often talked about a major issue with the crime problems in New York City throughout her tenure as police commissioner was that the bail reform was a major obstacle for them. And Kathy Hochul, who was a big supporter of the bail reform behind it, it plays blind to it like it's like there's no issue with it. And now Kathy Hochul is a big supporter of and a crime fighter. We're hearing from Jessica Tisch how Kathy Hochul is a crime fighter, probably the furthest thing from that. So more gaslighting, more lies, and it's just another pathway to her run in political office, you know, in our opinion, at the governor level. Has nothing to do with the fact that she's part of the 43rd richest family in the country. She's just such an amazing cop that she has to find her position in New York City government and New York State government. She's just a phenomenal crime fighter. And I love the fact when they say the pandemic era, and it's brilliant. You have to listen to what they say because they're not telling you specific timeline. I mean, it's total manipulation, but they keep saying the pandemic era. So, which they can always expand on. They could say the pandemic era goes back to 2019. They can even say 2018 and make a connection to it. They can say the pandemic era goes all the way up to 2025. What is the pandemic era? I'm curious. What is the timeline for that?
Yeah, it's very curious that subway crimes down, you know, all that when really no one feels safe taking the subway, even daily commuters. You know, daily, nightly commuters, people that rely on the subway consistently don't. You know, Mike Freed says the numbers do get updated. So the numbers might get updated in the interim in the prior year, but after the year is over and they're going backwards, say now we're in 2026 and they're going backwards, they absolutely do not update those numbers. So I mean, if you know different, you know, please share. But I'm like, again, why didn't they update those numbers why didn't they update those numbers when that article came out? Those numbers still show that crime was down that year when in fact it wasn't. So how were they actually audited? How were they updated? You know, I think conveniently when it comes to end of the year, those numbers do not get audited. That's what I meant. I didn't mean in the interim during the year. I mean at the end of the year review.
Now let's get into the
Sorry, but I just want to say there's no doubt about it. I mean, especially when it comes to random audits and we find numerous mistakes, it shows you it's not updated. And thank God for them it's random, right? Because they're not going to update everything. I mean, Mike Freed, I think you did crime analysis, right, brother? And I respect it. But do you really think that at the end of the year that they're doing a full analysis of every crime? It's a random audit. And if one gets missed and it's not caught, they're not going to fix it.
Forget about one. I'm talking dozens and dozens. That doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't get updated as far as I know. Look, if you know better, let us know. You know,
I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
2025 crime numbers starting with shootings. In 2025, New York City recorded 688 shooting incidents, the lowest number in the city's history. That didn't just break the previous record set in 2018, it shattered it with 66 fewer shootings than that benchmark year. Compared to 2024, shooting incidents fell by 216 citywide. That is a 24% reduction. They fell 36% in the fourth quarter of 2025. And in the month of December, shootings fell 43% with just 35 shooting incidents citywide. That is the lowest number of shootings ever in any month of the year, beating the previous record of 36 shooting incidents set in February of 2018. We see the headlines and we hear the pundits talk about crime being out of control in our city. These numbers tell a very different story. To put all of this into perspective, in 2025, we halved Chicago's more than 1,400 shooting incidents, despite having roughly 3 times the population. And we have Philadelphia's shooting total as well, despite having more than 5 times the population. This underscores just how far New York City has pushed gun violence down at a scale unlike any other city in the country. And it puts this moment into historical context. For decades, people have pointed to the early 1990s as the moment New York City turned the corner on gun violence, years that had been studied and written about. What is striking is that the drop in shootings from 2024 to 2025 was of a similar magnitude. Given all of this, it should come as no surprise that the number of people shot in New York City also fell to historic lows in 2025, with 856 shooting victims citywide. That is 41 fewer people shot than the previous record year of 2018. Compared to 2024, shooting victims declined by 247 citywide, a 22% reduction. That progress accelerated at the end of the year. In the fourth quarter, shooting victims fell by more than 34%, with December posting the lowest victim totals ever recorded for that month. And compared to 2021, 1,021 fewer people were shot in New York City in 2025. Those historic reductions in shooting incidents and victims weren't confined to a single part of the city. They were reflected across all 5 boroughs. Manhattan saw the steepest decline in shootings in 2025, down 38% year over year. The Bronx, Queens, and Staten Island each saw drops of roughly 25% or more. Brooklyn also saw a significant decline, with shootings down 15% below the previous benchmark set in 2024. Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island each had the lowest number of shooting incidents for any year in recorded history. Now let's get into the full crime picture. Major crime in 2025 was down 3% citywide, with reductions in all 5 boroughs, including a nearly 4% decline in public housing. Can someone just get me a glass of water?
So let's stop there. So she talks about all the history they've made. They've made so much history. And now when you talk about murders and you talk about shooting incidents where someone was actually hit with a bullet, it's fair to note that when people are arrested for that, they're not issued bail. They can't be really re-released back onto New York City streets. So of course those numbers are down because bail reform really doesn't apply to those cases, right? So that's one thing. The other thing you got to note, they're talking historic. We did this, we did that. But what'd she just say? Overall crime's down 3%. Oh, where's the history there? And you hear, to me, she doesn't sound sick to me at all. She sounds extremely nervous, extremely unconfident, and I believe it's her conscience. That's what I believe. What do you think, like, with this? Have you ever seen her? Oh, just get me some water real quick. She looks like she's about to faint. Oh, and Capacito was there yesterday, and she put up in the chat. She was in 1PP yesterday in the press room at this thing filming this, and she just put in the chat, Jessica Tisch seemed extremely nervous.
Well, I guess she's, we can see she's part of the 43rd largest, richest family. So she's used to asking people to get her stuff. Yeah, get me water. But it's pretty funny, right? I studied a lot of body language in my life, and I still do. I've read a lot of stuff on body language to help, especially doing plainclothes operations in the New York City Police Department throughout my career. And one thing in body language, you also learn with body language, is when people talk, when they, at the end of a sentence where it's kind of like a higher pitch, there's you see like a lack of confidence in what they're saying when it's more like question based. And I see that in Jessica Tisch in comparison. If we were to watch other press conferences right now in comparison to now, you'll see a huge difference. Huge difference in how she's speaking and her level of confidence. To me, it sounds like she just wants to get through this and get it over with. And we can see the lack of confidence. And that's why she needs water at this point, because she's choking up because her mouth is telling a lie while her brain, in my opinion, knows the truth. And I think, she said from the get-go, when she became police commissioner, if you remember, I think it was the first week, she said that she's data-driven. So who best to manipulate these numbers than Jessica Tisch? She told us she's data-driven, and that's what they're doing. They're driving the data in a direction that they want to tell the story. It's interesting. I asked, what is the pandemic era? We just learned. I said, could be going back to 2018. What do they tell you? In comparison to 2018, up to 2024. So those 6 years, 2018 to 2024, are not important. So anyone that has lived through those 6 years, open your eyes. You just woke up. Those years didn't count. You didn't wear a mask. You weren't forced to inject yourself with the vaccine if you worked for an agency or you went to school. This didn't happen. It's just a figmentation of your mind. You jump from 2000. We all jumped through some type of portal here. We went from 2018 to 2024, not the beginning of 2024, late 2024. How convenient. And now we're comparing the numbers to Philadelphia and Chicago. So what you just told us is that Philadelphia and Chicago is documenting their shootings properly. How can we see what's going on here right now when everyone's talking about it? I travel the entire country, and people are telling me, I went to New York during the time of Giuliani. I went to New York when Bloomberg was mayor. And then I went to New York the past couple of years, and I felt it. I could see a huge difference. Are they lying? Are they lying about what they feel? We've had a major transformation in how the police department operates. The police department, most of the cops have been exhausted because they're working so much overtime because of the disastrous experiences that people are having in transit. Pastors United, how you doing, brother? He's here in the chat. He's often advocating for transit, and he's put out some pictures recently on social media showing how decimated it is in transit right now. So she implemented these Q teams to address those quality of life issues, and we're seeing them. It's astronomical. Pastors United has put out plenty of pictures showing you what's going on in transit. So this is an outright lie. This is complete gaslighting. And right now, she has to absorb this on her own right now, knowing it's an outright lie. In my opinion, they all look uncomfortable. They all look insecure. You can see her level of confidence has changed in this press conference in comparison to what we see before.
Yeah, absolutely. She would walk in from day one. She walked in like she was the boss. She was not I never seen her hand tremble. Cafecito says it here. She was trembling. I mean, why? Why? What is the concern? I was a few feet away from her. What was the concern that that she's so nervous about? And when you talk about the crime data and you talk about the shootings, like what happened to the shot spotters in New York? We had pointed that out 2 years ago. Like they just don't go off anymore. The shot spotters don't go off anymore. You don't hear the shot spotters. And now recently, some have appeared to have miraculously turned on, but very briefly. So maybe they come back on. We're still paying the money for them in New York, but I believe that we're not even the ones that are on those incidents, unless someone's hit, they're not getting documented. So obviously you're going to be way below. You're going to be way below Philadelphia. You're going to be way below Chicago when you're not documenting bullets flying in the air. You're not. It's like, oh, no. Yeah, they shot at all you guys, but you didn't get hit. That wasn't a shooting. That was just reckless endangerment. So there's that. So let's go further.
All good. Thank you. All good. Thank you. Oops. Sorry, I had something in my throat. Thank you. Here, Chief.
She's
Make no mistake about it. These reductions are the product of our precision policing strategy. putting an unprecedented number of cops on the streets and in the neighborhoods, driving violence, including thousands of additional officers on foot posts and conducting targeted takedowns of the most violent gangs operating in our city. Last year alone, our Detective Bureau carried out 70 takedowns, resulting in the arrest of 390 gang members. You can see the impact of our zone strategy most clearly in the places that have historically experienced the most violent crime and where we have maintained permanent precision policing zones. Take the 2-5 precinct, which includes the 125th Street corridor. Major crime there dropped by 21%. Or the 110 and the 115 precincts, which cover Roosevelt Avenue, where major crime fell 24%. Now let's go through the 7 major crime categories. Citywide, murders declined 20% in 2025, with 77 fewer people murdered than 2024. And the declines deepened at the end of the year. In December, murders fell to 15 citywide, down nearly 38% from 2024. Alongside those reductions, our Detective Bureau has maintained a murder clearance rate of 69% in 2025. That citywide decline was driven by significant borough reductions. On Staten Island, murders fell by more than 60% in 2025. Manhattan was down 33%, Brooklyn was down 24%, and the Bronx was down 18%. Robbery declined nearly 10% wide in 2025, a reduction of more than 1,600 incidents year over year.
So before we go further, robberies could absolutely be manipulated by the way you take the report on the ground, but murders cannot, right? A lot of people attribute murders being down to improvements in the medical industry. Now, I don't necessarily believe that to be true. But if you go back to Sam Antar's earlier reporting 2 years ago, before he got into the whole Letitia James mortgage scandal, and you look at whitecollarfraud.com, he clearly does reporting on some manipulation with the homicide numbers, right? And so it's curious that they went back in years prior and changed the classification of homicides for the year earlier, so it would appear that crime would be down, right? And so read that reporting from whitecollarfraud.com, because people say, well, you can't manipulate homicides. But if you read some of Sam Antar's reporting, and I believe it's dead accurate if you read it, there was never a rebuttal done to any of his reporting. They never spoke on it. If you read his reporting on whitecollarfraud.com, when it's specifically related to homicide reporting in New York City, you're going to see that there's some discrepancy even with those numbers.
In 2025, burglaries fell nearly 4% citywide. That decline accelerated at the end of the year.
Eric, is it a burglary or is it a criminal trespass?
It's funny, I talked about that, right? How many criminal trespasses are actually dwellings? They're actually burglaries. Here's another indication right here.
Down more than 15% in December and 10% in the fourth quarter. Grand larceny declined nearly 2% citywide in 2025. While this category remains one of the city's most persistent challenges, the full year numbers show continued progress as well. Auto theft declined 5% citywide in 2025, with a nearly 8% drop in the fourth quarter compared to 2024. That late year decline reflects early progress from our work with auto manufacturers, including targeted efforts with companies like Honda to address vulnerabilities and disrupt theft patterns before vehicles are stolen. Felony assault remained virtually flat for the year. The overall picture on felony assaults is shaped by 2 important dynamics.
Wait. So robberies are down, grand larcenies are down, but felony assaults are flat? How?
Yeah, exactly. You know what's interesting about this? So you have to ask yourself, how does a police department as large as the NYPD or any other large city in this country manipulate crime without any further accountability from the FBI. Well, and the reason is because the FBI doesn't really keep stats of local crime. What the FBI does is they make an analysis based on the crime that's reported through the National Crime Information Incident-Based System. So if it's not reported, it didn't happen. I mean, something we always learned in New York City Police Department and policing is something I would always hear from veteran cops and even old-time supervisors is that if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And it doesn't mean crime. That just means anything. Just something that you kind of learn in policing. So how important documentation is. So in my opinion, what they're doing is they're not documenting a lot of the information. They're also misrepresenting it. And again, we go back to this whole idea that let's just pretend the pandemic era didn't exist. And what we also hear is not raw numbers. We're hearing percentages. And percentages, and if anyone's ever done any studying, an analysis of statistics, anytime you focus on percentages, those percentages can be manipulated. And we're seeing it right in front of our eyes.
Well, and I think the clearest example of even manipulation of felony assaults and gang assaults is when we look at Melba, Queens, which was a high-profile media incident, right? Group of teens, not even teens, but young youth, young adults, driving around, racing, basically doing a neighborhood takeover with cars where they're going to do burnouts and all these things. And what happened is there were multiple felony assaults that occurred. There was actually an arson that occurred, and it all got documented under one report of misdemeanor assault. We had a male get gang assaulted. Gang assault in itself is even just a minor injury is a felony, and it was not documented as a gang assault. But this individual had several broken bones, fractures all over his face, his body, and he was hit with weapons, which is assault too. And that was documented as a misdemeanor assault. And if that's happening during high-profile media incidents where it's being reported and the NYPD still documenting it as a misdemeanor, the level of crime manipulation, in my opinion, is at an all-time high. We're not at historic lows in crime in New York City. We're at the highest level of crime manipulation that's ever been. And it's disgusting to watch, honestly. It's really disgusting to watch. Because when we're seeing incidents like that get reporting, when you have a guy who was targeted in his own home and someone was shooting at him while he was home in his house, bullets are flying through his house, and we document that as a criminal mischief / reckless endangerment instead of a shooting, I mean, we have a big problem. We have a big problem.
First, assaults on public sector employees, which include police officers, increased by roughly 25% last year, a serious and unacceptable trend that reflects the risks our officers continue to face in the line of duty. Second, domestic violence continues to drive a significant share of felony assaults, accounting for nearly 40% of these crimes citywide. The NYPD made fundamental changes at the end of last year to how these domestic violence cases are handled. In October, we created the Domestic Violence Unit within the Detective Bureau, a survivor-centered, trauma-informed approach that places specialized investigators in every precinct. It ensures continuity from complaint through prosecution, and it brings consistency and accountability to cases that demand it. Citywide, rapes were up 16%, largely due to a state law that went into effect in September 2024, which rightfully broadened the legal definition of rape to capture the full range of these crimes. Within that increase, domestic violence-related rapes rose by 25% and now account for roughly half of all reported rape cases citywide. That's why domestic violence cases, including sexual violence, are now being handled through the NYPD's Domestic Violence Unit with the focused attention that they require. I am looking forward to that starting to pay dividends in 2026. And progress extended into our transit system. 2025 was the safest year on our subways outside of the pandemic years since 2009. For 6 consecutive months, major crime on the subway system fell, contributing to a 4% drop over the course of the year. Transit robberies reached their lowest levels ever in 2025, even when you include the pandemic years, down 12% compared to 2024. And for the year, shooting incidents on our subways were down a remarkable 63%. Put simply, on a system that serves around 4 million riders on an average weekday, there were fewer than 6 major crimes per day. These results don't make the transit system safer, they make it feel safer too. A recent poll conducted by the MTA found that nearly 7 out of 10 subway riders say they feel safe using the system. That is an increase of 12 percentage points from the beginning of the year. That shift reflects what riders are seeing: more officers on trains and platforms, and a consistent focus on maintaining order where transit crime most often occurs. And none of this happens without partnership. The progress that we have made in the subway system was supported by the sustained commitment of Governor Hochul, whose investment in transit safety has strengthened our ability to deploy officers where they matter most and sustain these gains over time. Beyond the transit system, we applied that same disciplined, data-driven strategy to crimes that directly affect daily life, including retail theft. Retail theft is a recidivist-driven crime that spiked in the early 2020s, and communities across the city felt the impact in very real ways, from everyday items like toothpaste being locked behind cases to local businesses struggling to stay open. We heard that concern clearly from residents, workers, and store owners. In 2025, we responded with focus and with urgency. Retail theft declined by 14% citywide. That turnaround followed a clear strategy. We identified the patterns driving retail theft. We concentrated resources at high propensity locations during peak hours, and we shifted from pass-through enforcement to sustained investigation.
All right, let's talk about retail theft, because that's annoying me. One retail theft, when you look at retail theft in New York City, most places stopped reporting it because the cops come there, they don't even do anything, right? The other thing is, what they're doing with retail theft is they're going around to these businesses and they're like, look, don't call us when one person comes in and robs and gets away. Wait till they amass, $900 so it doesn't break the grand larceny threshold. Wait for them to amass that on multiple incidents, then call us and we'll all document it into one petty larceny report. So there are literally thousands of retail thefts that are occurring every day in New York City that the police department is not documenting. This has absolutely nothing to do with actual good police work happening. This has nothing to do with actually preventing retail theft. This has everything to do with the manipulation of crime statistics. That's all it is. It's just another added play on how we're going to show that the numbers are down when actually it's rampant.
Well, I actually think that Jessica Tisch is actually admitting, if you actually listen to the subliminal message, they're admitting that the pandemic years, and if you listen throughout this conversation, they often change in the conversation. I'm listening. If you listen to detailed information, indicating the pandemic years to me is a mask for the long-term trends that happened during those years of crime. And so they're admitting that those pandemic years was a major increase of crime, which is why they can't give you the numbers and refuse to report it. Not fail to report it, they're actually refusing to report it. We even went back to compare to 2009. So what they're doing now is they're cherry picking to find the right data to make comparisons to. I mean, I've heard before people say, it's not like 1990. Well, we shouldn't be comparing to 1990. I mean, we're in a total different generation. We're in a different era. Life has changed completely. 1990 is before 9/11. The world has changed after 9/11. Everything has changed. Cell phone use, just the way that we live. So I don't think those comparisons can be made. If someone says, crime is low compared to 1991, yeah, of course. But these are metrics that can't be compared. We're talking about two different animals. But this is a major mask of the long-term trends that happened during the pandemic years. And to me, it's an admission of the crime failure during those years. And they won't tell you exactly what happened. They just keep referring to the pandemic years, and they keep pushing the goalpost. First, it was 2018, then it was 2009, then it was early 2024, then it was late 2024. So ultimately, this is just exactly manipulation of data right in front of your face, manipulating statistics right in front of your face. This is just complete mask for the pandemic years. And I think this is just, it's amazing that they can get away with this, that the public is listening to this. You're watching the city unfold in front of your eyes. People have gotten burned in the subways. It's a disaster in those subways. I speak to my mother. My mother still lives in Brooklyn, and she tells me how different it is right now walking the streets of New York City. My mother loves to walk, go shopping. She takes the train. She goes to Manhattan. That's what she likes to do. And she tells me that she doesn't have the same feeling on the train that she had several years ago before the pandemic. You know, she's terrified right now in comparison to what it was before. So are her eyes lying to her?
Something's lying to her. Maybe it's a conscience. So KB in NYC says, John, I've seen murders carried as DOA investigate or held as CUPPISs. And I've seen actual 61s held by the commanding officer. And so what he's talking about is homicides, murders being down. And if it's carried as an investigate DOA, that's not actually a murder. So if you could carry that for a few months while the investigation's down, that does not count during your homicide. The other thing, when we go back to what else was happening, is nowadays we have something called a non-negligent homicide, which I never heard of before this administration, before the Eric Adams administration. So they're carrying murders as non-negligent homicides. So guess what? When you do that, when you add all that stuff up, guess what happens? You get murders down, right? Like, so like that's what happens. Let's continue on in the press conference.
As a result, nearly half of all retail theft complaints resulted in an arrest, the highest rate since 2019. While we have made historic gains generally fighting violent crime, we have not turned the tide yet on youth violence. In 2025, 14% of shooting victims were under the age of 18, an increase of 5 percentage points from 2024. And 18% of shooting perpetrators were also under the age of 18. These are the highest percentages that we've ever seen for both measures since we began tracking this data.
So how could that be? How could you be at the highest rate of juvenile violence and juvenile shootings and also be at historic lows in crime? That is the biggest oxymoron there. Like, honestly, if you're going to go up there and spew bullshit, just leave some facts out at this point. Because, I mean, I think that just debunked her whole thing. Everything's good. Everything's good. But, you know, we've never seen this amount of youth gangs. We've never seen this amount of youth violence, this amount of youth shootings. And all of our shooters are young, by the way.
It's funny how, before you go ahead with it, but it's funny how she's trying to draw a paradox that she's trying to say that two opposite things are true at the same time. That crime is down, historic lows, but we're having this major crime in juveniles. With juvenile crimes, crime is at an all-time low, but domestic violence is just out of control right now. Where the rise in sexual assaults in domestic violence homes is up. Two things completely opposite, but true at the same time. That's what she's trying to tell you right here. And I'm amazed that at no point, no one's interjecting at this point. Whoa, wait a minute. What about 2022? Are we really going to play this game of the pandemic years? But let's continue to go on. Let's play this game.
That reality demanded a change in approach. That is why this fall, we implemented school safety zones, modeled after our violence reduction zones, but designed specifically to keep kids safe. These zones focus on the places where young people are most likely to fall victim to a crime: commuter corridors, bus stops, and the routes students take to and from school. And the early results are significant. Since September, within these zones, overall crime was down 53%, and shooting incidents and shooting victims are down there more than 75%. Excuse me. We also changed our strategy with school safety agents, including deployments in and around schools. And the results there were striking too. School-related enforcement is down 21%, and school-related crime is down 22%. Get another sip of water. Thank you. Sorry. Okay.
All right. Take it, Xanax.
All right. Addressing youth violence isn't the work of one unit, one agency, or one solution. It requires all of us, families, schools, communities, elected officials, and law enforcement playing our part to keep young people safe. The same is true when it comes to transportation safety. You often hear transportation safety discussed in the context of other agencies, and they deserve so much credit. But I want to brag for a moment about the NYPD's role. Traffic fatalities reached historic lows last year, falling 19% from 2024 and to the lowest total ever recorded in New York City's history. That progress is the result of focused enforcement, particularly against the behaviors that put lives at risk, including drunk and impaired driving. Through sustained DWI enforcement and targeted deployments, NYPD officers are taking dangerous drivers off the road. Last year, DWI arrests were up 15% compared to 2024. Safety in our streets depends not only on enforcement, but on our own judgment. In February, the NYPD updated its vehicle pursuit policy to limit pursuits to the most serious and dangerous crimes. The impact was immediate. Last year, vehicle pursuits dropped by more than 60% compared to 2024. Just as important, the risks associated with pursuits declined sharply as well. Fatalities fell by more than 80%, collisions dropped by nearly 50%, and injuries were cut almost in half. Next, quality of life.
So let's stop right there, right? So here's a big point.
That one.
Here's a big point that I think just gets glossed over in the media. She goes in and she's like, oh yeah, you know what happened last year? We changed our vehicle pursuit policy. It's like, no, you absolutely did not change your vehicle pursuit policy, because your vehicle pursuit policy was always to not chase in New York City. Only the most dangerous and violent crimes and criminals are you going to chase. What happened is you put an absolute morons in charge of the NYPD. Well, she didn't, but her buddy Eric Adams did. He put John Schell and Kaz Daughtry. They took young rookies, had them led by incompetent, low-integrity supervisors. And what they did is they said, look, we don't want anyone chasing. We don't want anyone running from you. If anyone runs on you for any reason, we want you to engage in a vehicle pursuit in the most dense population in the world. What does that mean? That means we don't care if you run over an old lady. We don't care if you run over kids going to school. We don't care about the lives of innocent people. We're just not going to let anyone run on us. And by the way, don't worry about it. Of course, you could smack up all these cars and you could kill innocent people and you could do all these things. But the person that you chase, don't really worry about it, because even when you arrest them, we're going to undercharge them anyway. And the DA is just going to let them out the next day. And not even the next day. They're going to let them out within a few hours anyway. And they're going to be released from the precinct. So it was the dumbest, most incompetent people running the New York City Police Department. And the only thing that changed was they took John Schell out of the chief of patrol spot, promoted him to the chief of department, and they told the cops, you're no longer doing what he told you to do. You're going to go back to the old protocol. So yeah, in essence, they updated the protocol. They revised the wording of it, which was actually says the same thing as the old one did. So it's an absolute spin. And honestly, innocent people died as a result of this. And young cops who would have went on to had good careers in the NYPD, careers and lives were altered forever following the policies of these incompetent, low integrity police managers, politically appointed police managers. It was literally the dumbest thing. We called it out from day one. Everybody was clapping. Oh, yeah, Shell said we ain't going to have it no more. I love it. And we're like, cops are going to get hurt. Innocent people are going to die. This is the dumbest shit I ever heard of in my life. I'm glad John Schell got to go viral on social media and in the media. And everyone's like, yeah, the cops are back again. The cops were never back, dude. They were never back under Eric Adams. They weren't running the West Coast offense. They were running the woke playbook, the woke DEI playbook, and they're still running it today. So what do you think about her saying we revised the vehicle pursuits?
What, you know what I learned by Jessica Tisch throughout her tenure and also through this press conference. Sal Greco refers to her as the soccer mom. I think she should be called the queen of rebrand because she rebrands everything, right? Oh, we got a new policy. No, you don't. The reason why you now have a 60% decrease in vehicle pursuits is because now you actually followed the policy. So it's embarrassing that you actually have a 60% decrease in 1 year because that's an admission that there was a failure on the vehicle pursuits. And how could you have such a downward spiral in crime, but yet during that time you had to have a 60% decrease in vehicle pursuits? So which one is it? How could we have to pursue so many vehicles if there's no crime out there? So again, lie after lie, subliminal message after subliminal message. So you know what? Sal calls her the soccer mom. I'm going to call her the queen of rebrand. And here's another rebrand. John, great comment here. By the way, the comments in the chat today are awesome. John, how you doing, brother? Says school safety corridors have been around since the 80s. This is not new policing. Yeah, she just told us how they have school corridor. We've always had school corridor. And what was it? Safe passage it was called in the school system. We've always had that, just different names. Yes, we check on the schools. So she is the queen of rebrand. It's embarrassing. We told you 3 years ago that the vehicle pursuit policy was not being followed. It's dangerous to the city. It's dangerous to the cops. John Schell utilized his own policy and created this motivation behind vehicle pursuits that was irresponsible and reckless, out of control. But what do we expect from someone who's so unprofessional, can't carry themselves with any bearing, on, off duty, on the job, and in retirement? Just a complete disaster. We've seen full incompetence at the highest level in the NYPD, while Jeffrey Madry decided one police plaza was his bank account, while John Schell was completely unprofessional on social media and his entire tenure, and Kaz Daughtry was running around like a child playing games on YouTube, and Mike LaPetrie, the jellyfish standing right here, didn't say a goddamn word. And now he's the chief of the department. Didn't say nothing. Yes. Two things can be true at the same time. Is he more intelligent than they are? Is he knowledgeable? Yes. Does he deserve to be there? Not at this point. Because during the pandemic years, Mike LaPetrie was completely silent and complicit. He knew exactly what was going on with other chiefs in the police department, especially the chief of the department, especially Jeffrey Madry and John Schell and Kaz Daughtry, and he didn't say a word. Jellyfish.
So now she's going to rebrand what was known as the NYPD conditions teams. She's going to go into quality of life and pretend that she came up with this great idea that the NYPD is going to go ahead and enforce quality of life crimes to try to improve the life of everyday New Yorkers. Wow, amazing. Never heard of that before, Jessica. I didn't know we documented issues on maps and then deployed resources to them and went after not only the major crimes, but the lesser crimes. But she's going to continue to rebrand it as, this isn't broken windows, though. This is precision policing. The theory of broken windows is going after quality of life offenses in order to prevent major crimes, just so we're aware. So listen to this.
Since April, our quality of life teams have been responding to the daily issues eroding people's sense of safety, specifically as they were reported through the 311 system. That work is happening against a backdrop of sharply increased demand. Since 2019, 311 calls have increased by 104%. Even with that surge, citywide response times for chronic quality of life issues improved by an average of 22 minutes in 2025. Service times dropped by more than 14%, and contact resolutions through 311 increased by more than 16%. In 2025, hate crimes declined 12% citywide. Anti-Semitic incidents also declined, down 3% year over year.
Wait, before we get into hate crimes, you heard what she said there about 311, right? The response times declined 22%. Why don't you talk a little bit about that meeting, that what they're telling, cops are now telling people at community council meetings about 311?
Sure, I found the clip. I found the clip where there's a female community police officer from the NYPD speaking at one of these community meetings, and we know this happens quite often. I've seen it myself, but particularly directing the community. Don't call 311 when you have a problem. Call me. I'm giving you my number. So of course, that's the 311 contact resolution, is that we have the community police officers, and I've seen it also with the NCOs, and now we see it at actual community meetings with community affairs police officers telling the community, don't utilize 311, call me. Why? Because they're just so nice? Because the police officer wants to be bombarded with phone calls? No, because commanders don't want 311 calls that they have to respond to and explain at CompStat, right? Because part of the crime fighting tool is the 311 calls, right? A lot of these calls that go to 311, for instance, gambling, disorderly conduct, noise complaints, loud parties, these are precursors in violent neighborhoods, and now everywhere is violent in New York City, for shootings, particularly when it happens with gangs, things like that. Those 311 calls are precursors. So we're not documenting them. So, of course, we have less crime, less things to document, less things to misrepresent. We have the community police officers telling the community, don't call 311. Don't go onto the 311 system. Call me. I'm giving you my phone number. That's their contact resolution.
Yeah. So that's the whole thing. It's like, oh, don't call 311, call us, and we won't do anything with it anyway. We'll document it on a piece of paper, and then hopefully we'll make it over there. But, we're busy and we're short-staffed, so we'll try to get over there. Absolute joke. So now she's going to talk about hate crimes. She already just said hate crimes are down 3%. When I was a cop, they would actually upgrade things to hate crimes. And I was like, this is not a hate crime. I was on scene one time for guy parks his car, woman, I believe she was Muslim. He opens her door and smashes her door into his car door, causes a dent on his car. He yells at her. He says, go back to your country. And he leaves. Now, I get a call like, oh, that's a hate crime. I was like, wait, time out. What's a hate crime? And they're like, what that guy said. I was like, no, that's free speech. He said, go back to your own country. She damaged his vehicle. He was mad and he made a stupid remark. Like, that's not a hate crime. And they're like, no. We're going to make this a hate crime. You got to notify hate crimes task force. I was like, I'm not notifying anybody about this. And anyway, hate crimes task force, next thing I know, they run with it. I don't know what they wind up doing with the guy that didn't commit a crime. He used his freedom of speech to say, go back to your own country, which was it right? Was it wrong? I don't know. But maybe she should have paid for the guy's door, said something in a fit of anger. But today I have a feeling the exact opposite's happening based upon everything that I'm seeing in the media. I feel like today, things that are actual hate crimes, because to be a hate crime, it has to be, the crime has to be motivated in part or in whole because of your ethnicity, your religion, your gender, your sexual preference, more motivated in part or in whole. There has to be a crime committed, one. And I feel like today, they have a vested interest in not documenting things as hate crimes. So listen to what she has to say about hate crimes. And again, how does this make sense that crime is down, but hate crimes are up, right? She says hate crimes are down 3%, but let's go further. Listen to what she has to say about it.
But they still accounted for 330 cases, representing 57% of all hate crimes reported in New York City, despite Jewish New Yorkers making up roughly 10% of the city's population. These numbers remain far too high, and anti-Semitism continues to be the most persistent hate threat that we face. The NYPD will continue to confront hate crimes aggressively and protect every community targeted because of who they are. The results that I have just described are extraordinary on their own. They are even more extraordinary when you reflect on where this department stood just a year ago. A crisis of leadership, a department plagued by scandal at the top, and public confidence deeply shaken. And yet, through it all, the men and women of the NYPD kept doing the work.
Wait, so there were actually corrupt officials running the New York City Police Department? I thought that I thought we were just fucking spewing bullshit over here. I thought we were just talking shit for 3 years, and now, oh wait, we just got an admission that, oh yeah, no, actually we were plagued by scandal and there was a ton of shit going on in the New York City Police Department, and the people that were running the New York City Police Department were a bunch of skells.
Oh, you gotta love it. You know what I love about this whole thing is, I'm curious, right? Because I spent almost 20 years in policing. How do you aggressively do proactive police work against hate crimes? Do you get inside the mind of people that, hey, that make sure that if they commit a crime, that it's not motivated, that they're not thinking about, that this person's ethnicity or race, and that's why they want to, victimize someone. Or we're going to get into the minds of people so that they don't think in part or whole about someone's identity before they commit a crime. This is absolutely ridiculous, right? Is this like, it's almost, to me, it's almost like it's a comparison to the CCRB wanting to investigate cops for racial bias policing. You can't disprove or prove what someone was thinking about someone else's race in doing their police work. The same thing goes here. We investigate hate crimes when they happen as an outcome or a byproduct. But we enforce all crime the same manner. You can't enforce, in my opinion, you really can't enforce hate crime in any different than you do in just any other day crime. John, you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, again, like you can't bring down hate crimes if you're not bringing down all crime. Like I've been saying that forever. Like if you're not attacking minor crimes, you're gonna see a huge increase.
Exactly.
Because we're not out on the street, and a lot of the hate crimes, honestly, aren't actually hate crimes. You know what I mean? Like it's someone running their mouth and saying racist shit while they're really just committing a crime, and you just happen to be the unlucky bastard, whatever you are. Right? Because I've seen things that have been documented as hate crimes where it could have been the person's similar race, the same verbiage would have been used, and the same crime would have happened. The crime happened because it's a criminal act. You know what I mean? And so the whole I never liked the hate crime thing. I never liked it at all. I think that like I don't think that there should even be a classification for hate crimes unless there is a specific group out there who's like, all right, we're going to go out and we're going to target these people solely based upon X, Y, whatever that is, right? We're going to target police officers. We're going to target Jewish females. We're going to target females. We're going to target homosexuals. Like if there's a group doing that, then I could understand it being investigated as a hate crime and having a hate crimes task force. But other than that, most of this is just actual crimes happening and people saying racist shit while they're doing it. That's what most of the hate crime is to me. And so to hear her like gloss over the corruption, and Marlon says it best, there's still corruption and still plagued by scandal. And clear as day, I mean, I still can't get over the IB investigation that we got back. And it was closed out under your administration, Jessica Tisch. And it literally verifies everything that we thought, everything we alleged. And your group one covered it up. And you went with the investigation that was conducted by the NYPD's chief of internal affairs, who you threw out and was a literal subject of our investigation, but yet you glossed over the fact that he went around, did informal interviews, even though he was a subject, and I instructed Internal Affairs CO Group 1 and the investigator that he is not privy to see this case, as he is an allegation. There's an allegation against him of criminal association, as well as all of the top chiefs of criminal association. And Group 1 didn't even investigate at all that claim, when clear as day, it's been reported in the papers, it's been known, and we submitted physical evidence and proof of that fact. And you were like, you know what? I'm going to throw Miguel Iglesias out because, he didn't do his job as the chief of internal affairs. But at the same time, we're going to close this case that he said, no, everything's good. Everything's good. Shell's got all your records in retirement. But Miguel Iglesias, while Shell was on the job, warned and admonished him. He didn't even warn and admonish him. He said, no. It was part of his police duties that it was okay that he was looking up John's record. And it was okay that people were running Eric and mine's educational records to decertify us because we were giving our opinions. And it's perfectly okay that gay cokehead criminals that hang out with Eric Adams and the dirtbag police commissioner and the dirtbag fucking skell that was running IAB. It's perfectly okay that they were threatening John and his family. And it was perfectly okay that this fucking piece of shit sergeant threatened the lives of our kids and then admits it in the GO that he was doing it to cause fear, panic, and alarm. And your internal affairs unsubstantiated that claim, even though he fucking admits it in that bullshit GO15. Right?
Hold on a minute.
Good now. It's good now.
John, hold on a minute. What you don't understand is that happened during the pandemic years. So it doesn't count. It doesn't count that our kids were threatened. It doesn't count that we had the upper echelon being so unprofessional on social media. It doesn't count that our First Amendment speech has been suppressed. It doesn't count that they tried down this platform. It doesn't count pandemic years. That's why, John. If it was 2025, it would be okay. But during the pandemic years, that doesn't count. Doesn't count. You could try to rile up John and Eric and the Finest Unfiltered and rile up their kids and their family safety, but that's not a crime because it was during the pandemic years. Thank you, Jessica. That is under your tutelage, by the way. Group one that you had to do musical chairs totally botched our investigation on purpose. How is former Chief Iglesias our subject of an allegation of corruption and the whole entire internal affairs case was labeled as misconduct? Just that on its face alone. And that was under your tutelage. You need to look into that. You need to reopen that case. And you need to look at the foil that we have. And if you're not as disgusted as we are, you have to ask yourself, do you really belong in New York State government?
You know, I think the thing that bothers me the most is like this piece of shit admits to a crime in front of a sergeant of police. The investigator, a top-tier investigator in Special Investigations Unit in IAB, right? Because I think what annoys me and you the most is like when we read SDS, we think it's Sergeant Detective Squad, but we're probably fucked up. It probably just stood for Slight Down Syndrome Galvez. That's probably what the fuck it stood for, because obviously you don't know how to investigate a fucking crime, right? Or do you just not know how to investigate a crime when it's a fucking dirty cop that's doing it at the behest of the upper echelon of the NYPD while they're threatening us with known criminals? And what they did is reverse engineer every fucking thing we said and took out all of the allegations. That is the most Mickey Mouse investigation I ever seen. And anyone who fucking laid eyes on it, anyone who signed off on any of it, I'm going to call you out forever. When you're in retirement and you're on LinkedIn like everybody else, like, let me just write a little article about law enforcement. I'll put this little post out about how honorable it is. I'm going to be like, oh, yeah? What'd you do when that motherfucker threatened my kids? What'd you do when that motherfucker was running a dirty, corrupt fucking police department? You did absolutely nothing. I'm going to be calling you out forever, and there's going to be a lot more names that are going to get released, and there's going to be a lot more shit that's going to come out about this. So stay tuned, motherfuckers. Let's go on.
Well, there's no doubt about it. We'll never rest. We're not going to back down, and we stand our ground to that piece of shit sergeant that threatened our kids. One day, you're going to have to tell your story. One day, did you do this on your own? Or did someone motivate you to do this? We'll find out. We'll find out. So that's the reason why. I mean, listen. We're all logical. We're all intelligent people. We all understand common sense. The fact that it's in the paperwork, in the casework, in our foil, that this sergeant admitted to aggravated harassment, and there was no DA referral. There was never an arrest. Actually, there was a refusal. John and I spoke numerous times by email. We have it all documented that we want Sean Mohabir, who was a former sergeant NYPD, we want him arrested, or whoever was behind All Cops Are Woke, if it was he alone or if there were others, right? Those are the allegations that we have right now. Whoever is the alleged perpetrator, arrested. And we want that if he was motivated by someone else or if he did it completely on his own. So I'd love to know exactly what happened in that GO15. And if anyone here is outside the NYPD or police enthusiasts, GO15 is an interrogation where someone is answering questions based on an investigation, right? They're held to they cannot refuse to answer those questions. And in that GO15, he admits to lying. He admits to lying and admits to the aggravated harassment, and he was never charged. In fact, John and I we were told to go to Florida to file a report. This was an active member of the NYPD actively committing a crime while serving with the NYPD, and the NYPD refused to make an arrest and actually referred John and I to Florida, and even further, then sends the cops to John's house. Well, they didn't send it to me because they couldn't find the RV. So you know what? Fuck you. And also, Richard Galvez, that piece of shit, also, if you're watching this, right? That sergeant piece of shit who refused to give us the information, said, oh, you shouldn't feel safe right now because the person of interest actually resigned for the job. I said, really? Does that make any sense? So this person resigned. We don't know who the identity is. Could be completely pissed off and feel that they got terminated because of us. And we don't know who it is. And now this person could try to come shoot our kids or something like that. We had no idea. Absolutely ridiculous.
No, yeah. So when they're on
back
LinkedIn
then.
years from now, when we're 80 years old, I'm still going to be typing away like, oh, yeah, you're still a piece of shit and you did this. We're just going to let everybody know. Fucking scumbags.
And keep in mind, Richard Galvez worked in the 7-5 precinct. Who else worked in the 7-5 precinct? I believe Kaz Daughtry worked in the 7-5.
Oh.
Jeffrey Madry, who's from Brooklyn North. So is former Chief Iglesias. Do you think
John Shell?
John Shell, right? Do you think Richard Galvez, the sergeant in internal affairs, this case just landed on his desk, or he was handpicked? He was selected.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they put the other loser in charge of it. 2 loser lieutenants, then another loser sergeant. Then that sergeant sends the cops to my house on a Saturday night without warning, telling them I'm in trouble. Like, are you fucking kidding me? You're another one. What was that loser's name? That fucking retard. Excuse me for the. I don't mean anything by anyone that's mentally disabled.
Travis Rutherford. That's another one.
Yeah, that's another one. You fucking another waste of fucking air. So here you go. Let's go on.
No. These were special interest sergeants. They're very intelligent.
Yeah, slight Down syndrome. That's it. Slight Down syndrome. Rutherford.
New Yorkers depend on. They met the standard, they upheld their responsibilities, and they delivered remarkable results that speak for themselves. That kind of work matters, and people noticed. In 2025, the NYPD hired more than 4,000 officers across 4 academy classes, making this the largest hiring year on record and bringing us virtually to the department's authorized headcount. That kind of growth does not happen by chance. It happens when a profession earns the confidence of the city that it serves, and when people see this work as something worth stepping forward for. And despite what critics say, this year the NYPD did not experience an unexpected or extreme wave of departures. Retirements were exactly as we projected at the beginning of the year. Resignations before pension eligibility are down more than 40% since 2022.
Stop the presses right there. So they hired the most amount of people. We saw 31 cops get to keep their job. Now, I'm not knocking you 31 cops. You didn't do anything wrong. You applied for the job and they let you through. However, you had no business being in the New York City Police Department and they allowed you. So take it as a blessing. I hope you go on to have very successful and productive careers and you don't stain the patch that you wore. But know that if there was a competent department with integrity, none of you would be New York City police officers because they bent every rule. You've had bad criminal records. You had bad psych evaluations. You couldn't pass physically. You had no business being in the New York City Police Department. So consider it a blessing. Count your blessings every day, say your prayers, and go out and do a good job. Take that blessing and run with it, right? Sometimes God forgives, right? So, but they had no business doing that. And do I think for 1 second that those 31 individuals, do I think for 1 second are alone? And those were the only 31 individuals that have no business being on the police department? Absolutely not. What did we tell you on this podcast? They are literally not even finishing the background check. They're just letting you into the police department, and then they're finishing their background checks on you. Meaning that we don't know. We could learn, hey, you have ties with terrorist organizations. You have ties with gangs. You have all of this bad history. You're accused of crimes in other countries, in other states, in other cities. And we're letting you on the New York City Police Department. Why? Because we're so desperate. You don't need to have even the slightest amount of cardiovascular endurance because we don't even want you to run the 1.5 miles. We no longer care about your criminal background. We no longer care about your gang tattoos. We no longer care about the psych meds that you're on. And we're just letting everybody come. And then she goes on to say that attrition is exactly what they predicted. So you predicted attrition to be horrendous. Congratulations. That does not alleviate anything. And then she goes on to state, well, people that are resigning prior to pension eligibility, so she's leaving out vested people. She's not considering the vested because vesteds are up. She's talking about straight resignation prior to eligibility. That's down 40% since 2022. Again, I'm going to say it. Throughout the entire Eric Adams administration, more cops have retired than any other point in history. Throughout the entire Eric Adams administration, more cops have vested out, which is mean they retired early, than at any point in New York City history. During the Eric Adams administration, more cops have resigned prior to being eligible for pension than at any other point in New York City history. All of those three things are true. She points to 2022 because in 2022, what was Eric Adams doing? He was putting people like Marlon Bethel and myself on the chopping block and saying, you're either getting terminated or you're putting this in your body. You're going to bend down and let me medically rape you, or you're not going to continue on in your career. So what happened? You had resignations, retirements, and vested retirements at unprecedented levels in 2022. That is the year that she is pointing to, because if you point to any other point in New York City history, the amount of attrition, the amount of vested retirements, the amount of retirements, and the amount of people who resigned will be shown at unprecedented levels because Eric Adams a fucking failure and you hitched your wagon onto him.
First of all, these numbers that we saw is astronomical. Something that we just didn't see in the start of our careers, throughout the tenure of our careers. No one ever came on the police department with the idea that they're going to use it as a stepping stone for something else, unless they were getting hired by one of these police departments that had just these astronomical salaries, right? Like, for instance, Port Authority Police Department, or Nassau, or Suffolk Police Department, or maybe Bergen County, New Jersey. But other than that, a majority of the police officers, most of them in the NYPD, got on the job, and the job was to make the touchdown, the finish line. And always the finish line was 20 years to get that variable supplement. And in many cases, I think we used to start to call you remember, if I just want to say, going back, John, if you remember, there became a point in time in our careers where the saying was 25 is the new 20, right? Most people had the goal to actually stay 25 years. And we saw the complete turnaround, and it was in you too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. So it was in the Eric Adams administration. So look, John left at approximately a little less than 18 years. That means he would have gave the police department 7 more good years. Think about that. Talk about how cut short it was. And Marlon, of course, had the same ladder headed where he could have stayed to 25 years also. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I could have stayed to 25. I was offered intelligence. I was offered the squad, but I decided I could no longer do what I was paid and trained to do. So I wanted to debunk any misinformation out there. I was not terminated. I was not fired by the community, as John Shell likes to say. I made the decision to retire. I was talking about overzealous CCRB. I made the decision to retire on my own volition. Now, but every one of us could have easily been on the job 20, 25 years. But what we saw during the Eric Adams administration, and I saw it towards the end of my tenure before I retired in September of 2022, is people were running out the door. And we saw it in retirement here while we've been doing this network. People are running out the door. I speak to cops on a constant basis, and so does John, and so does everyone on the network. We get calls constantly. I'm on the job a year. I don't want to be, or I hate the job. What do you think I should do? We have cops that call us, no joke, with 18, 19 years on the job, and they're asking us if it's okay if they leave. They had so much overtime. If they bypass the variable supplement and just leave the job and invest out with a full retirement and wait a year to the 20th year to actually get the retirement. I've never seen that. And we've seen it time and time again. It just became a common theme. John, you know, constantly we're getting calls. We got a guy in the job. He's got 19 years. He got so much overtime. He can't get the same amount of overtime because the overtime was curbed after Jeffrey Madry opened up the bank account at One Police Plaza. And the overtime was cut short, and many people had to make the decision, and they were miserable. And they had to make the decision to retire with 19 years on the job. 1 more year to get that variable supplement, and they had to make the decision to retire. It was just completely mismanaged that we put veteran police officers with 18, 19 years in a pinnacle position that they had to make a decision to retire because they could not keep up that overtime because the amount of overtime they received was astronomical. Not because they had good crime fighting plans, because they had no plan, and the only plan was just to work cops to the point of exhaustion.
Yeah. So FYI, super chats aren't working, at least for me. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with YouTube. They don't love us. We always accept donations at www.thefinestunfiltered.com. Just saying, there's a donation link there too. But we truly appreciate you, Hardcore. Like, dude, you're very generous, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
Hardcore. Thank you so much, man. Thank you for giving us your variable supplement. We appreciate it. I don't know what's coming January. I know tax season's coming, so maybe we'll take your taxes too.
All right, let's get through the rest of this bullshit interview. We got a lot to go here, and we've been going a while. All right, let's go.
2025, we outpaced attrition.
It's because you talk too fucking much.
By more than 800 officers. Our officers are the ones doing this work on the streets, but the direction of this department is set by its extraordinary leadership. I want New Yorkers to know that they are served by an incredible executive staff at the NYPD, including highly skilled civilian leaders.
All right, I'm going to skip through her. Screw her at this point. I mean, so she's just going to continue fluffing everything. I think she might ask for water one more time. I'm not sure, but she definitely takes a nice breath after she gets off that podium.
Leaders and thoughtful and
joy. She couldn't hold her own water bottle. Someone give me water.
All right, let's listen to the boy wonder who looks more out of place than Kaz Daughtry did up on that dais. So
Is this his first job, John? First day at work?
Yeah. Just give us all your public safety knowledge, Zohran. Please tell us about your Department of Community Safety. Look, did you see her? Look at her. You just see her grab the water again? Give me the water. I'm telling you, I think she almost went down from anxiety. I'm telling you.
Joe Roscoe said it. I think it was Joe Roscoe. That she looked like she was gonna have a nervous breakdown.
Cavacito said she was trembling, and
Yeah.
Cavacito was right there. So, all right, let's listen to the boy wonder.
Good morning, everyone. It is a privilege to be here with you at One Police Plaza and to be surrounded by so many committed public servants here in the NYPD. I want to thank Commissioner Tisch for her leadership and Governor Hochul for her steadfast partnership with the city. I will not repeat the incredible statistics that the commissioner just shared, but I do want to echo the human story that they tell. Because as impressive as these numbers are, we know that they capture something tangible, the lives New Yorkers live, the ways that our neighbors interact with our city, and the countless hours of unseen hard work by the men and women in this room and beyond it that have delivered this progress. When we say that murder went down by over 20% from last year, that is anything but abstract. Each of those percentage points adds up to dining room tables without an empty seat, lives free from the dark cloud of grief, children that grow up with a parent at home. When we talk about the safest year on subways absent the pandemic years since 2009, we are talking about a city that is and feels safe to explore, where a young New Yorker from Inwood isn't afraid to ride a train to meet her friends in Flushing, where a senior citizen on the Upper West Side isn't reluctant to get on the subway to see a grandchild in Bushwick. These numbers, whether they represent fewer robberies or fewer victims of gun violence, mean a more vibrant, joyful city. It's measured in restaurants and bodegas that keep their doors open later, families that don't hurry home as soon as the light begins to fade from the sky. But make no mistake, none of this arrives by accident. Each of these markers of achievement is a testament to a police department that cares about this city and works with this city to remake this city. Thank you to those who are here at One Police Plaza and to those across our 5 boroughs for the work that you all do in making today possible. As we lead together, I want to see these numbers continue to drop, to continue to nurture the partnership between the NYPD and the communities across the city, and to empower our police force to focus on the serious crimes that they signed up to tackle. We are going to mend the frayed social safety net that fails so many of our neighbors, tackle the mental health crisis that causes so much pain, and continue to deliver public safety across our 5 boroughs. I want to say thank you again to everyone who worked so hard to bring us this day, and thank you for all of the work we will continue to do to lead together over the years to come. And with that, I will pass it over to our partner, our governor, Kathy Hochul.
Mamdani could read from a script words that he did not even care to memorize or anything else. That was the most disconnected speech I've ever heard from him to date. Like, yes, it was a campaign speech, like most of you were saying, but he wasn't even comfortable speaking those words. He could give two shits. Like, the police department's not his concern. He's one of those rich New York transplants that's like, everything's good. No, yeah, like I like sometimes I take the train and like, you know, like I've been to Bed-Stuy and like I went out to like restaurants and stuff. And you know, it's really safe, you know, but I don't really go out late past 9 o'clock unless I'm in a secured building in Soho. And I only go to private parties and I attend events and I go to restaurants that the average people can't afford, like completely disconnected from the reality of average New Yorkers, just like somebody else who happens to be the police commissioner of the NYPD. Like, this is an absolute joke. At least she knows the shit. He doesn't even know it, man. That was a disgraceful speech.
So, John, we went from the dream team to the elite team. That's what we went from. We went from the dream team to the elite team. So, wait a minute. You don't believe him that he was honored to be at One Police Plaza with these great police department, with this great crime fighting force? I'm so happy to be here and the work that you do, and we cherish that. You don't believe these fine words he said? He really looked connected to those words. I believe him. I believe him.
I would just love to be able to hear someone's thoughts. And the only person's thoughts I would want to hear is Mike LaPetri during this whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
Here's a guy who served over 30 years in the most violent precincts in New York City. And he's standing there completely emasculating, listening to people who he prepped over and over again. And they're not even able to reproduce what he said. Right. And the coaching. I would love to hear his brain. That would be the ultimate. We wouldn't even have to do a podcast. You just put what they said and then replay it, what he's thinking as they're saying it. Like, it would be, I mean, it would be phenomenal. And the same would be true for John Shell too, but except you wouldn't get like you wouldn't be able to understand what
I can tell you what he's thinking. You want to know what he's thinking?
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. These guys don't know what they're talking about. It's okay. I'm the chief of department. I'm the chief of department now. You know, I'm really important. I'm the chief of department of the NYPD. It's okay. They have no idea what they're talking about. I'm the chief of department, man, at the New York City Police Department. It's okay. John Shell made room for me. That's all he cares. He's happy. He don't give a shit. You know how I know he doesn't care? Because our kids were threatened and nothing was ever done. There was never an arrest made. John Shell was unprofessional on social media. Kaz Daughtry, he never said a word. The Eric Adams administration was ripped by scandal. He never said a word. Mike LaPetri was abused at the city council hearing by Jumaane Williams. Showed zero backbone. So I can tell you, he doesn't care right now. All he's thinking is, well, John Shell made $28,000 a month. If and his ankle got him 3/4, maybe I could say my feet hurt from standing here. I could get 3/4. That's all he's thinking about. He's got numbers going. He don't give two shits. You know what? Because he hasn't said a word. Not a word through this entire time. Nothing. He's chief of department. It's all that matters.
I heard he was the cleanup boy in the chief of department's office. I heard he cleaned the casting couch. He went in with the Clorox wipes that we paid for.
Somebody needs to do it.
Somebody had to get rid of the DNA evidence. You know, Hardcore says the one guy who should talk doesn't talk. Yeah, I mean that's
exactly
the only person qualified to speak on public safety in that entire room. Mamdani failed miserably at this press conference. So that's him. Let's hear Hochul, because this is a guaranteed campaign speech. I listened to it briefly yesterday. I didn't really dissect it, so let's go through it again. Here comes the beaver.
The elite team.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, a boomer from Buffalo. Like,
Yeah.
she's going to let you know about New York City, what's happening. And she understands like the crime in New York City as she goes home to her $3 million home.
John, this is the wealthy administration of politicians we've never seen. It really is. This is we're seeing like the richest people right now on this day. Except for Mike LePetri, like, I won't make as much money as them because chief of department, but I do it right. I do it right.
Look, you know, like being a slave to the kings and the kings and queens is good, right? Like, you know, I love it. Stephen S. keeps saying slave, water. That's literally what it is. That's Mike. Like, that's what it is. Like,
dude, she doesn't even ask. She just puts her hand up. Water. Like, who does that?
You know, but like, you know, you stay close to them, you get to think that you're wealthy and elite. Like John Shell thinks he's wealthy and elite now, but it's like, dude, you make a little bit of money every month. Congratulations. Oh, you got $1 million house? Congratulations. I got 2 of them. Like, what do you want? Like, I don't understand, you know, like what, like, you know, they think that like in this next level, because, you know, my pension's $23,000 a month. It's like, all right, dude. So what do you think? Like, what do you think? You're at the level of a Tisch family or at a Mamdani family? You're not even close, dude. You got a compound where you pay security guards and you get driven around and people go shopping for you and they clean your house? Absolutely not. You're not. But these people do.
Mayor, thank you for reminding us of the humanity that is involved here when our men and women in uniform go out and save lives and prevent crimes and solve crimes. There are real people whose lives are not shattered. There's families not spending the holidays in an emergency room waiting for hopefully some positive news, or the continuation of therapy that's required, mental health and physical therapy when people are victims of crime. So, yes, there's a very human story behind these numbers that we don't want to have lost, but these numbers are nothing short of extraordinary. I want to thank Commissioner Tisch for providing the leadership that this department has needed, and the executive team that responds to that leadership so forcefully, so successfully, and all the people who are out there on our streets and in our subways and our neighborhoods who now feel that sense of pride again of being a member of the NYPD. That is a direct tribute to you, your philosophy, your way you're empowering others to do what they know how to do, and I thank all of you for that. And so we can talk about the numbers again. I'm not going to repeat them all, but I do want to say these reductions in crime that we're talking about today, and we are, again, as a football fan, we are not spiking the football because we always know that something could change. But today is a milestone, something we could not have foreseen, I believe, 4 years ago when I first became governor. We were in the depths of a crime crisis throughout the nation, not just New York, not just New York City, but across the nation. But we were besieged by crime. Shootings had doubled in just a couple of years. Repeat offenders were routinely being sprung free, out to commit crimes again. Thieves were ransacking our local businesses with impunity, and people just felt so unsafe. And it wasn't just our residents. The word was out among people who might visit from other states and other countries. Oh, it's a dangerous place, don't go there. That's what we are entering just a few four short years ago. So I also made a vow. I would take this on directly, with resources and with commitment. And I decided we needed to do a better job of aligning our state and city crime fighting efforts because we had been operating as independent actors, but with the same objectives. It did not make sense to me. So I said we'll do everything in my power to restore safety and order to our communities. And we got to work, even statewide. I launched the first in the nation interstate gun interdiction task force. There are now 12 states, and working with the NYPD in New York, that share information, that track the iron pipeline, the flow of guns coming into our state, whether up 95 or up 81 from Pennsylvania, gun shows to our streets in the Bronx and in Syracuse. So we focused on this. Also, we had not properly invested in fighting crime. In my term as governor, we've invested $3 billion across the state, but significant numbers here in the city of New York to assist, because it's asking a lot for localities to be able to use the latest crime technologies. We've invested in drone technology and license plate readers and all the other avenues that are expensive for locals to do, but the state steps in and we say we can help you with that. And I've been proud to announce that all over the state of New York. We also had addressed our criminal justice system and had common sense legal reforms. Stronger bail laws to keep repeat offenders off the streets. We now have stronger discovery laws to keep criminals from walking free literally on minor technicalities. We had a situation where 90% of domestic violence cases were being eliminated, that people make their case, they come and tell their horrible story to someone and repeat the anxiety and the pain, and they're tossed out by a judge on technicalities because of the way our law was written. No more is that the case. Stronger red flag laws, strongest in the nation. And I'm really proud of that, because when you can identify that someone's making threats to a fellow classmate or showing signs that they could do harm to themselves or others, we now as a society have to take action, not just law enforcement, but teachers and other people in the community. They come forward and we find out if there are guns available, and if yes, we will remove them from that individual. That is how we're preventing crimes. As I mentioned, we equip police with the best technology, more officers on the subway. What a difference this has made. I can't tell you how many people, and I walk the streets of New York every day, people come up to me and say, I don't worry about my daughter getting on the subway to go to school anymore, because I know the efforts that you and the city have made. And it was resources. It was money to support the overtime that was necessary. And a short time, the National Guard, just to calm things down when the crimes were going up. But now the NYPD, the transit police, MTA are doing such an incredible job. So we've seized more guns, we've launched specialized units, and it's starting to pay off. Again, I'm not going through all the data. She stood here a long time. And she might need some more water soon. But I stand here with a heart full of gratitude. And I'm going to be using my next years in office, starting with our State of the State literally next week, to talk about our enhanced crime fighting strategies and how we're also going to protect places of worship. We're going to change the law to protect places of worship, and we're going to talk about that next week. And tomorrow I'll be announcing our plan to confront the 3D printed ghost guns. This has been a real challenge for us, not just in the city, but across the state. It's the fastest growing firearm safety threat in the entire country. So point is, no matter how far we've come, we will remain vigilant, unrelenting in our mission to keep New Yorkers safe. And we'll continue to prove that a partnership like the likes of which we've not seen before is also the key to that success. And you can count on me on being that partner that's going to protect you, provide the resources you need to change the laws that need to be changed, and make sure that you have everything you need to do the incredible work that you do. So I'm here to say thank you to the NYPD, from our commissioner on down to the executive team, but certainly the people on the street that I always say hello to when I'm walking by, and just say thank you, because these are tough, tough jobs. We should never forget that. And I thank our mayor for having the wisdom to continue this leadership, because the numbers are showing that when you put a strategy together, have the team to execute, put the resources behind it, we can keep New Yorkers safer. And that's what it's all about. Thank you very much.
So I'll say one thing. Hochul is a seasoned politician. She's up there spewing garbage, but she's able to do it without really looking at that paper, and she's able to just keep running. What'd she say? Absolutely nothing. She said, don't blame me for bail reform, even though I helped create it. Don't blame me for discovery law, even though I helped create it. Don't blame me because we tweaked it and it still sucks, both of those laws. But I'm going to take all the credit, and I'm going to tell you that all of these things work. And then let's focus on red flag laws. Like, let's focus on how we're going to circumvent the Second Amendment and lock up innocent people who aren't violent repeat offenders, who actually have legal guns in their home. Let's talk about that. And it's like, you want to identify people who are unhinged? Why don't you look at your former chief of department, who looks like a disheveled, insane mess, who looks like he completely targeting myself, Eric, and Sal? What do you think? Do you think red flag laws should apply there, Kathy Hochul? Do you think when someone's getting drunk over the weekend and going out on an unhinged Twitter rant and reading off not only me, Eric, and Sal's jacket, but also I saw a post where he put out about another guy, Eli Evans, where he had all his personal information and he was reading it out. Does he have someone feeding him this info, or does he have it on his desk? I'm going to say he probably still has access to it, as well as has it on his desk. So that's what I think. And then she goes further onto the 3D printed gun laws. Who have they really went after with these 3D printed guns? legal firearm owner, gun enthusiasts who aren't a threat to anyone, who haven't attempted to sell any of that technology to anyone. And meanwhile, in New York State, if you want to get a gun license, you're waiting years. You have to get a lawyer. In New York City, same thing. The NYPD, because they so incompetently or so intentionally are holding up these concealed carry permits to that comply with the Second Amendment in the United States Constitution and the latest ruling in the Supreme Court. They're so against the United States Constitution that they're just holding up your gun permit. The only way you're going to get your gun permit process is if you know one of these skells that are standing up here on the stage, or you know someone that's tied into city government or state government that can make a call to get your process out, to get your application process, or you have to hire an attorney to do so. It's so bad that retired cops who have to update their carry permits, their concealed carry permits, are unable to do so, and they're being told, look, we're probably going to, I know your thing's been expired for 6 months now. We're probably not going to get to it for another 6 months. And we know you submitted this months prior to your permit expiring. But look, hey, just keep this email and you're covered because we can't get to it. So you have numerous retired cops running around New York City that cannot get a New York City concealed carry permit. They're being told to hold their email. The email that they're good and they're covered, even though we can't even competently hand out the concealed carry permits to just the cops. Never mind to the civilians who do absolutely nothing wrong, who are also entitled to exercise their Second Amendment privileges, as well as think of all of the attacks she's done on the Second Amendment, where even if you are a concealed carry holder, if you knew one of them or you got an attorney, if you walk in Times Square, you're in a gun-free zone. You could be locked up for a felony. If you bring your legally owned firearm that you intend to do no harm to anyone, only to protect yourself of others from death or serious injury, you're committing a felony if you enter an MTA transit, a bus. So, again, I was having this conversation yesterday. New York City is not. If people are like, oh, New York City's falling, we're falling into communism, we're falling into socialism. I'm like, no. You already live in a socialist society. New York City is outside of the norms of America. She's spelling it out for you right here on this platform.
Oh, spot on, brother. I go to gun shops throughout the entire country. I've went to gun shops where I was in and out in 15 minutes with a firearm. It's absolutely ridiculous. If you're licensed, this is America. So Second Amendment, you should be able to get that firearm. But in New York State, and especially New York City, every obstacle is created and impedes you from actually embarking on your Second Amendment right on getting that firearm. Sal says it perfect here. One of our friends and listeners right here says gun-free zones are kill zones because perpetrators do not follow the law and are not licensed, so they know where to go where people cannot protect themselves. The only ones that follow those rules and those absolutely draconian laws where signs are posted that you cannot have a firearm is law-abiding citizens. Criminals do not follow those laws. It's absolutely ridiculous. A criminal doesn't walk by and, you know what? I'm not carrying my firearm here. I have a gun illegally, but I don't want to carry it illegally in this spot. The sign is not a deterrent. And again, you know what's great? I'm looking at this dais right here. And to me, we have a dais here of people that are running New York, but they're not even from the real New York. And I say the real New York. Neighborhoods like that I grew up in, neighborhoods like you grew up in, John, and our friends and listeners that grew up in New York, where our parents were blue collar. Some people, yeah, your parents had money, but you grew up in New York City. You played sports on New York City streets. Jessica Tisch is from the 43rd richest family in the entire country. She wasn't living the real New York lifestyle. She wasn't getting water at the local bodega. You see how she wants water? She doesn't say, hey, could you please give me some water? No, she puts her hand out and goes, give me water, because that's how she lived her entire life. And here we have another elite, Zohran Mamdani. You think he was on the streets of New York City playing sports? He can't even bench 135 pounds. I don't even know what he was doing. And Kathy Holzer, she's from Western New York, up from Buffalo. And she's trying to interject in New York City crime and New York City laws. All of them don't care. And then you have Mike LePetri, who's standing there completely quiet, the only one that has any experience in police work. But honestly, I don't even care. To me, He's voiceless and powerless at this point. I don't care what he says because intelligence is important, but to me, moral principle is far more important than intelligence. This entire time with this failed administration of corruption and scandal, he didn't say a word. He still doesn't say a word about internal affairs, about our families being attacked. He doesn't say a word about the First Amendment suppression to this podcast and to this network. He doesn't say anything about John Shell, how unprofessional he is on the job and off the job, active and retired. Doesn't say a word about John Shell saying that he has our records to our folders. So he's a piece of shit in my book. I don't want to hear a word out of him. It means nothing to me. Unless you stand up for moral principle, then your intelligence to me gets impeded and stops and it has a ceiling. This day is here is absolutely not a representation of New York. And John's absolutely right. You're already in communism. How do I know? Because I travel by my RV and how I live in America. I go to Florida. I go to Nevada. I go to New Mexico. I go to states like Arizona where Americans live and where Americans can actually buy guns and where Americans can actually live free and not live with politicians like that want to restrict every movement you make. In most places throughout this country, except for communist places, you don't have to worry about speed cameras at every corner and traffic at 25 miles an hour. Should you be going through red lights? Absolutely not. But at least you don't have that fear and that stress of, oh man, if I mess up here, I get a ticket. If I go 26 miles an hour, I'm getting a ticket. New York is a prison. Living in New York City is a prison.
No, it's terrible, dude. It's honestly terrible. It's really hard to watch what New York State and New York City has become, and it's like, somebody asked here, like, oh, well, I just want to make one comment. Craig CB said he doesn't believe that that's true, what I'm saying, because he got his permit really quick in 23. Well, good luck to you when you go to renew it, because I'm not going to show you my DMs, but I literally get DM'd every day from cops complaining about it. Hey, could you reach out? Go. New York One has done tons of reporting on this as well. So check those out. Like, I'm not pulling this out of my ass. Like, there's tons of retired cops complaining that they can't get their pistol permit renewed. And my own family too. So it's not even just people I interact with online or that I worked with. There's people directly related to me. So that's one. The other thing is, like someone asked, like, how did she get reelected? How did Mamdani get elected? Who are we running? Who are the Republicans running in New York? There is like look, either Kathy Hochul's going to be unseated by a Democrat and that person will be the governor, or Kathy Hochul's going to be the governor, because I don't see anything coming out of the Republican Party. You've seen, I think Bruce Blakeman's the front runner at this point, but you saw the other girl come up and she just disappeared. She was running for governor. She was going to do all this, and next thing we know, she pulls out and she says, Elise Stefanik. Everyone's like, Elise Stefanik for governor, blah, 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 blah. And next thing you know, she pulls out of the race out of nowhere. So, like, who's really the Republicans running? And when you look at the chart down slate in this election, all these Democrats are running unopposed in every seat. It's absolutely disgraceful. It's complete surrender of New York State and New York City. And it's literally going to happen across the country if we're keeping up at this rate. Look, I don't know Stefanik. I don't know if she's horrible. I don't know her at all. Everybody was like, oh, you got to get behind Stefanik. I'm like, I'm not getting behind nobody, because I'll tell you right now, none of them got behind me. So I'm not getting behind. I was like, who is Elise Stefanik? Never heard of her. Where was she during COVID? Where was she? Where was she while all the corruption was coming out in New York City? I know where Bruce Blakeman was. He was going out to dinner with Eric Adams. So, I'm like, I'm not getting behind nobody. Like, that's how I look at it. But I look at it like complete surrender of the Republican Party in New York State and New York City. So that's how they won. Let's get to the questions and get out of here, because we went a little long. This press conference took a lot longer to get through than I thought.
Okay, folks, so the way this is going to work, we're going to do on-topic questions first about the 2025 crime stats. After that, we're going to take a quick peek at our NYPD's next lead.
Do you see a roll of eyes? He said that questions are going to be about crime stats.
Oh yeah. She's fidgeting big time.
Is there anything you feel like you're going to change in regards to the previous administration? And also for the commissioner, people want to know if the NYPD is going to stay this course. So is there any changes you've seen about what works for the mayor?
Our crime fighting strategy in New York City is working. Now, I am never satisfied with the status quo just because it's the status quo. We're always going to look for ways to sharpen and refine. But I think it's very clear that our approach in particular to violent crime in New York City and to subway crime in New York City has led to historic results. And I don't have any changes on the top of my head that I can think of to it at this time.
And I will add that there is much that these statistics cover, the incredible work that we've spoken about today. And I will also tell you that as the mayor of this city, in just the last 2 days, I have been on site for 2 5-alarm fires, one in the Bronx and one in Queens. And I also know that the work of the NYPD extends to being first responders in those moments as well, in ensuring that we are taking care of New Yorkers and delivering public safety in a wide variety of ways. So these are numbers and accomplishments to be celebrated, and as the commissioner said, they're also ones to be built on, because we will not rest until we make this the safest city it can be.
Commissioner, have you had any changes in regards to working with the mayor or in regards to the previous administration? Any changes there?
So I have worked now, you're my fourth mayor. Wait, Bloomberg? Yeah, third mayor. And every mayor has a different style. And I have worked with each one of them quite productively. The mayor and I will continue to meet on issues, meet on crime fighting strategies, and I'm looking forward to those discussions. But no, at this time, there is no change planned to the crime fighting strategy that has delivered historic results.
Hold on. I just want to say, John, did that sound confident to you? If you had historic results, would you say historic results? I talk about the body language and her voice. She says historic results, kind of like she's asking a question. If you really believed it, you would say it much differently.
Well, the other thing is, like, you know, I really think like it's a disservice having most of these reporters in here. Like, most of the reporters that cover the NYPD and cover crime don't know anything about crime or the NYPD. And I think it's done intentionally, because like the question that should have been asked is like right off the bat is like, hey, are you disbanding SRG? Like, you're saying there's no change in our crime fighting strategy, but the strategic response group is actually part of that crime fighting strategy when it relates to incidents of public disorder, moments of public disorder, when we talk about protests that turn illegal, when we talk about even just policing protests and large scale events. They're a major part of that. And that all comes part of the crime fighting. And he clearly said he was going to disband them. Yet there's not one question about them in here. There's not one question about the citywide response team. And it's not because I don't think that the reporters, like, I never blame the reporters. Like, if they work on a story and the story gets squashed, it's usually not even their editors. It's coming from the top. When you have a billionaire heiress in charge of the New York City Police Department, if there's something that's really going to expose that what she told you on this podium today was absolute bullshit, guess what? There's going to be a call made to the very, very top of the New York Post, and the New York Post is going to call down to that editor and say, that story is absolutely not running. If you want to work here, pull that story right now. It's not running. Okay, yeah, no problem, boss. And that's what's occurring.
John, hold on a second. I think this is really important. So Neil01 says, wait, I just saw this in today's New York Post. Prosecutors demand changes to raise the age law as New York City youth crime hits historic heights. I'm looking at it right now. New York City youth crime hits historic highs in 2025 as parents blame raise the age law. It's interesting, right? Crime is at its historic lows, but raise the age, which Kathy Hochul supports, and so does Jessica Tisch here, that crime is out of control with juveniles, but crime's at historic lows. Which one is it?
Yeah. I mean, that's, again, it's just another oxymoron, you know? And look, I like most, I think I like all the reporters at the Post. I like all the reporters at the Daily News. I like all the reporters at the City. I like the reporters. I think the reporters actually, a lot of them care. A lot of them aren't just going through the motion, but like as a whole, I don't really love any of the publications because I don't really think they talk about the issues, and I think that like they really go off the marker. And the same's true for when I look at a Newsmax and I look at a Fox. You know, they're narrative pushing, they're narrative driving, and I'm not a big fan. Like people keep asking me like where I get my news from, and I'm like, I don't get it from any traditional source. Like I get my news from people. You know, I get my news from people. People send me things, I read it. I talk to people. Like that's how I get my news. I don't wake up and like I used to wake up, read the Post, read the Daily News. I don't do that anymore. You know, and you know, I mean, social media has really brought all of that into the forefront for all of us. Also, it'll feed you the top stories of the things you're interested. So kind of changes your algorithm. But I don't, anything that I read or anything that I hear, I take everything with a grain of salt, and then I go and do my own research, and then I form my own opinion based upon what I'm reading and what I'm seeing. And I think, you know, even when it comes to this platform, we're not always correct. This is an opinion-based platform that's rooted in fact. We show you the proof of what they're saying and why we think the way we're thinking. We don't say, hey, look, here it is, so this is what it is. They wrote this here, so here it is. She said that, so that's what it is. You know, we show you the yin, the yang, and then we give you our opinion and tell you why we think about it, right? Where you don't get that in traditional media. Traditional media, they just talk from the podium and that's it, right? What other media platform actually engages with the audience and engages with people who are going directly against what they're saying? Nobody.
Listen to this in this article that came out today. By the way, Neil, thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. That's why this platform is so unique, and you're a major part of this network and helping us grow, is because you bring up some valuable information. So listen to this. Ready? In the article, the kids are far from all right. Youth violence across New York City hit historic highs during 2025. Think about that. Youth violence across New York City hit historic highs during 2025, with staggering numbers of shooters and shooting victims falling under the age of 18. NYPD data released Tuesday shows. Listen to this part, ready? Last year, 14% of shooting victims and 18% of shooters were youths, NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch said during an otherwise triumphant news conference outlining drops in crime. These are the highest percentages that we've ever seen for both measures since we've been tracking this data in 2018, Tisch said. So again, they're playing the pandemic game on everything. How could shootings be at historic lows when youth violence is at historic highs and 18% of those shootings are youth victims and youth perpetrators? Again, complete oxymoron, and it's not a paradox.
All right, let's go further with these questions.
William Robert Nolan, you're right, bro. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit, dude. You're 100% right. That's all this is. It's a complete hogwash. It's just fluff.
Look, I think as the commissioner said, the two of us are in constant communication. And what New Yorkers deserve and what we are fully aligned on is the fact that we need to see genuine public safety across the city. And that is something that is felt when New Yorkers can walk through their neighborhood without fear or without concern. That is something that is felt when they see a city government that is addressing the fundamental concerns that actually underpins the misdemeanors and the minor crimes that we're speaking of. And that is going to be the focus not only of myself, but also of my entire city government.
I just want to add to that the Quality of Life Division is by no means a return to broken windows policing. It was done in response to a doubling in the number of 311 complaints that we have received in New York City over a period of 4 years. Those are people from every neighborhood in the city calling the city for help on quality of life concerns. Now, they vary neighborhood to neighborhood, but one thing that is true across all of them is that there are quality of life problems. And so the Quality of Life Division was designed to make the NYPD more responsive to 311 in much the same way that historically we have been quite responsive to 311. So we're responding to noise complaints. We are moving abandoned vehicles that have taken up parking in front of someone's home for months. These are things that we had not historically been responsive to, and New Yorkers were begging us for help.
So what she just said there is like they're not returning to broken windows under quality of life policing, which is insane. And what she's actually saying is they're not going to go after the problems that are related to youth violence, that are related to quality of life policing, like hanging out, drinking in the park, smoking in the park, disorderly groups. She's literally talking about abandoned vehicles and public nuisances other than things that are related to crime. Now, I don't believe what she's saying. I think they're actually going to push these quality of life teams to go out there and make arrests and do exactly what the New York City Police Department always did, which is broken windows policing. And that's what they pushed the citywide response team to do it, because all of them like to tout this democratic that they've created this new way of de-escalation and policing and this hands-off style of policing, but it doesn't exist. So once the crime starts to rise and they can't manipulate the numbers enough, and the media has no choice but to report it because people just don't believe them and people are furious and talking about it, and social media and platforms like this start to get way bigger views than they're getting and way bigger followings than they're getting, what they have to do is start to report on crime. And once that happens, and we've been watching this narrative since the existence of this platform, right? We watch us go up and down because they'll always suck you back in, because then they'll start actually reporting on facts. And once they start do that, the police department has no choice but to deploy broken windows, because there is no other effective form of policing. We've had numerous people come on here and denounce broken windows theory, but they cannot provide another way to do policing other than to go after the minor crimes. So she's telling you they're not going to do it, but it's a completely false representation. And if they do exactly what she's saying that they're put out there to do, they're completely ineffective. The whole thing's a complete waste of money and a whole complete waste of time. You don't need cops to do that. You could just hire more sanitation guys to go out there and tag those vehicles and get them out of there.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Listen, some call it broken windows. Some refer to it as proactive police work. I refer to it as intrusive police work. And intrusive police work means that your police department is engaged with exactly what's happening. Could be just people that are lost and need help on the street, need guidance. And it could be investigating crimes, or it could be just mixing with the community, and it could be making arrests. But this idea that the quality of life enforcement is not broken windows, it doesn't even make sense, because what they're telling you is they're addressing these low-level issues to prevent other crimes. That's the whole purpose of 311, not to bog down the 911 system, but to address minor issues. And these issues are brought up at CompStat because they are precursors to violent crimes, such as she just told you, noise complaints, right? Cars blocking people's driveways. As minor as they are, that's why they have Q teams, because it is part of broken windows. It is part of intrusive police work. It's police department addressing those issues to prevent further crimes from happening, such as noise complaints. I've seen numerous shootings of violent acts occur, and these were precursors to shootings and violent incidents, such as gambling, low-level minor things. I've seen violent incidents over blocked driveways, neighbors getting into spats that turn violent because someone blocked someone else's driveway. So this is part of broken windows. This is part of intrusive police work. So this is an outright lie.
Yeah. So Nin, our newest troll that just recently popped up, I wonder what his motivation was or where it came from. But he says, John's not smart enough to consider the origins of crime and their direct relation to a lack of resources for communities and their kids. Cops hate public investment unless it's for them. So let's break something down, Nin. My father grew up in the projects on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. His father passed away when he was 9 years old. His mother was mentally ill. So essentially, he didn't have a pot to piss in. Now, was crime rampant in that environment where everybody was broke? Yes, it was, but it was a different type of crime. There was racketeering, there was theft from businesses, there was theft of retail, there was all types of crime that was occurring. There was violent crimes and infighting amongst gangs, drug dealing, things of that nature. But the moral decay that we've witnessed is a direct correlation to the lack of God in communities, the lack of church, and the lack of fathers in communities. Because what they didn't do in the hallways when my father was growing up in the projects in the Lower East Side is they didn't piss in the hallway. They didn't throw their garbage out into the hallway and leave it there and let roaches and rats. The apartment floors were clean. The hallways in the projects were clean, and they weren't punching old ladies and disabled people in the face as they went to work and robbing them. So I understand how your socioeconomic upbringing could affect you. As again, you don't know my upbringing. You just assume because I'm white that I'm privileged, and I had an upbringing that was privileged and everything was handed to me. But from growing up around people who also didn't have a pot to piss in, I saw exactly the motivations for dealing drugs, the motivations for running numbers, the motivations for getting involved with criminal elements in society. But what's happening today is a decay of morality. And yes, we should make investments in society to keep these youths from entering into a life of crime. But the only investments that we're making today are investment into skills like yourself, if you are who I believe you are, to go out and get a government contract and a city contract and do that money and put a little cloud out there on social media and in the media like you're actually doing something to help kids, when your real motivation is just lining your own fucking pockets. Because that's what happened. All these people want to tout these resources and all of these other community resources, and they all fell on their face. Show me a community resource that works, that's outside of the government, and I'll gladly promote it on my social media, and I'll go out and I'll promote it with you. But you guys don't. You push all this bullshit anti-gun violence shit, and then what are you doing? You're getting all this money from public funds, and what are you doing? You're selling drugs and you're dealing guns and you're fucking shooting each other. So spare me the bullshit.
Well, listen, there's no doubt about it. I don't think that socioeconomic status actually affects behavior. I mean, I grew up poor myself. John, we spoke about this often. So did you. We both grew up in poor, working class families. You know, all my clothes, everything I've ever had were hand-me-downs, right? And we were white. It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with socioeconomic status. And how do I know? I took a course in college. It was called Urban American Blacks, and specifically on the Black community, talking about capitalism, racism. What are the potential effects of decay in Black communities? So, and unfortunately, a lot of it comes down to accountability. Especially, I worked in housing predominantly in my career, and what I saw in housing today, in comparison to what we see years ago, has nothing to do with race. Has nothing to do with economic status. We saw a loss of community and a loss of accountability. It comes down to accountability, where the community would hold each other accountable. That, hey, don't piss in your elevator, right? The mother would come out and make that kid clean it, but there's no accountability. There's no accountability on the families, and we shouldn't expect the police department to enforce accountability. The police department is too late for that. We need sense of community. And how do I know? I was living in Asia for a year, and some of the poorest communities out there, but it was clean, it was immaculate, and there was very little to no crime because the community held everyone accountable. Held everyone accountable, and it was always a thing of a representation of your last name, right? You wouldn't want to embarrass someone's family name. So we lost accountability. You're right. A lot of morale, decay of morality is equivalent to the loss of accountability.
Yeah. I love people calling us racist that can't even get out of the way that they're their own racists. It's like now he wants to talk about, we want to go back 200 years and blame why society has decayed. It's like, dude, my father didn't use that as a crutch, and he went on and had his productive life. And yes, there were things in the government that helped us, right? I told you, when my father got injured on his job that he had a hard time keeping because he had PTSD, because he went out and fought for this country, volunteered, went to the jungles of Vietnam because he believed in this country, and he was used and abused by politicians, right? When he came back, he had a hard time holding a job, but when he was holding one job, He got severely injured. He fell from the 7th floor to the 4th floor, broke every bone in his back. And so now we had no health insurance. We had no money coming in. And my mother had a high school education, so she became a school crossing guard. So is that government intervention? Absolutely. She didn't make anything, right? We just did it to have health insurance, right? And then there was a little bit of money. But yeah, did we eat government cheese or government rice? Yeah, you're damn right we did. We absolutely did for a very short time until we were able to get off of that. So yeah, I'm not against government intervention, but for you people to come out here and sit there and say shit like this, like racists from Bensonhurst using coded language to criticize the culture of the inner city. Everything that was occurring in New York City was occurring in Bensonhurst in the 80s and 90s was the same shit that was occurring in Bedford-Stuyvesant. All the vices that were there in the early 80s and the early 90s in Bed-Stuy and Bensonhurst were the same exact vices. All of the discrimination and racism that was occurring in Bensonhurst was the same exact type of racism and discrimination that was occurring inside of Bedford-Stuyvesant. What we had in common is we were all looked at as less than and lower than. Right. And it's the same thing for the overwhelming majority of Jewish New Yorkers, of Polish New Yorkers, of every race and ethnicity that ever got to grace this nation and this city. Chinese, Asian, whatever you want to say. It's been the same for all of us. We immigrate to this country. We come here without a pot to piss in, but the majority of us come here and get off of our ass and work. And some of us just talk about the last 200 years and go like this. Please, what are you going to give me? So spam me. And Juju, spam me. Your book sucks.
Well, first of all, I'm Jewish, and I can tell you this. Every ethnicity and every race and every sect in this entire world has faced some type of conflict in their generation and lifetime where they face some type of anti-Semitism or face some type of racism or face some type of bias in some form of slavery. So this idea that it was just the black community and that white people are racist is absolutely ridiculous. 9 Inch Nails, I just want to say thank you for the compliment, because that's the only thing that 9 Inch Nails says about me here is that I'm a violent cop. So did we lock up the most violent perpetrators? Absolutely. So yes, you're welcome for getting violent perpetrators off the street. And it does take violence to beat violence. So yes, I'm proud that all my cops have all their fingers and toes, and so do I, because we dealt with the most violent perpetrators. So you could just say thank you and have a nice day. Other than that, listen, I want to thank our friends and listeners. I think this is a great podcast. I think we covered a lot of content. I think it's really important. You can see just how uncomfortable Jessica Tisch was during this press conference. And I found that when the questions were being asked, I saw her body language. She kept trying to distance herself from the podium. So you could just see her body language was showing that she didn't want to answer questions. And she's usually pretty fruitful and very enthusiastic about being at that podium and definitely being ready for question-based responses. So I think NYPD, along with Jessica Tisch, especially with Jessica Tisch, is just gaslighting everyone when it comes to crime. I think Kathy Hochul is just a complete pro and just a complete slime ball when it comes to government politicians. And Zohran Mamdani is as fake as pleather. This guy is so fake. His smile is fake. Everything about him is fake. He could care less about the NYPD, and it's unfolding as we speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just finish up these questions from reporters.
If I can ask about the gang database, you mentioned that there were 70 takedowns. And did the gang database contribute to those takedowns? And does that play with the mayor's intended direction for the
So
This reporter just asked about the gang database. Whoever you are, you're banished from 1PP.
I have been very clear that the gang database is a tool that has helped us both in terms of fighting gun violence. Certainly when we have a shooting in the city, we use the gang database to anticipate where we may see retaliatory violence, and that has helped drive our gun violence down. But yes, it also contributed to the gang takedowns that have been so successful this year.
All right, so that's an important one, right? I think this is the first time ever where we've seen a police commissioner get up and completely contradict the mayor. The mayor said he's going to abolish the gang database. All his supporters say they want the gang database abolished. And now Jessica Tisch is saying it's a valuable tool. I agree with it. We've went into in-depth in numerous podcasts about the gang database and how it doesn't affect anybody and how it is not a racist tool. It's actually a tool to save gang members' lives and to stop further gang violence. And it doesn't have any effect on a person that's listed in the gang database in their actual life outside of it or going on into the future. So I agree with what she's saying here. But this is, I've never seen this ever in New York City history where the police commissioner completely contradicted what the mayor said he's going to do. What are your thoughts on the gang database about her saying this, but Mamdani saying he's going to abolish it?
Well, so far watching this most ridiculous bullshit press conference, this was the only truthful statement that has come out of her mouth this entire time. The gang database is an invaluable tool for police department performance and also the correlation with how that deals with public safety in the streets. There's no doubt about it. The gang database is something I used often doing policing, especially special operations. It's outstanding. It allows you exactly what she said. That's the most truthful statement she said today, is that the gang database is a great, powerful tool to prevent retaliation, which falls under broken windows of truth of police work. Yes, the gang database is a valuable tool to monitor gang members, monitor crime areas, prevent retaliation, prevent further shootings, prevent violence. The gang database is a valuable tool. And if it does not affect anyone's lives if they're not committing crime, absolutely. And it's not something that will take someone's life. The gang database is very powerful. And unlike what the city council says, it doesn't show any bias or disdain the gang database. You have to fit certain criteria to actually be on that gang database. You have to, in fact, be a gang member. So this is absolutely ridiculous. So this is the only truthful statement that I've heard today.
I love to welcome all. We need to do a podcast just like solely based on race. I think we should do like a weekly one and just get it out there because this is like insane to read. Manny Farley, 8065. You guys do not understand systemic oppression. Please stop speaking on black people when there's no representation. So Manny, if I bring you back 6 months ago, the mayor was black, the police commissioner was black, the chief of department was black. You had all your representation. All the top chiefs were black. How'd that work out? Like, I don't understand. I don't see any Italian people up here. I'm not crying. LePetri says he's Italian. He doesn't look it to me. I don't know. You know, he's probably half or something, but I don't know. I don't see any representation. We never had an Italian president. We had a half black president. You know, this whole thing about representation will fix everything. It's such a joke. It's like, no, show me great people that should be where they should be, and I'll get behind them. Show me great people that should be in the chief of department's office. I'll get behind them. And we have plenty of black people that should have been the police commissioner and that should have been the chief of department that were passed over because they didn't align with white leftists. So spam me.
We got any more questions?
Yeah, let's go. Let's finish these questions.
Yeah, so a few things. First, we went all in on it. We had thousands of cops basically all year long, but particularly over the summer when we know that gun violence has historically surged, working overnight foot posts on the streets and in the neighborhoods where gun violence has been the most persistent problem. And those deployments have shown unbelievable results. But we also have better data and more refined systems than we have ever had in the past. And one of the things that I have enjoyed working with here is leveraging that data and those systems to make sure we are going after the right people and putting the cops in the right places. Yeah, and I'm actually looking forward to having these conversations with the mayor and with his team because, as I mentioned, to address the problem of youth violence and kids falling victims to violence, it's going to take an all of city and frankly an all of state approach. There are things that I've went through and quite some detail that the NYPD has changed this year, which are beginning to show some real results. I have some ideas on what the Department of Probation and what ACS can tweak and change in order to continue to improve outcomes. So yeah, addressing youth violence is going to be an all of city and all of state approach.
I'll just add one thing. Just also to the commissioner's point, we tend to tell young people in the city what they shouldn't do, and we have much less to say on what they should do. I think the commissioner's exactly right in terms of the whole of government approach that's required to also provide services, programming, and opportunities for young people across this city. And I look forward to having those conversations and delivering on that for the young people of the city. Thank you. You know, I will say I made the decision to retain Police Commissioner Tisch because of the work that she was doing. And that was work that could be measured in statistics of the kind that we have shared today, and also in the manner in which she tackled the crisis at hand at the upper echelon of the department that she was inheriting. And what we are seeing are the fruits of that work, and I look forward to continue to building upon that.
All right, that's over. But absolutely didn't answer that question. Has he changed anything? Obviously, there's going to be huge changes coming to the New York City Police Department. We're going to see the Department of Community Safety come out. And the other thing that she pointed to is that they kept crime down, not by any strategies. The only thing they relied on was the data of where crimes were occurring and deploying cops on mobile field force. So it doesn't seem like mobile field force is going away anytime soon. That seems like a doubling down. This is what we're going to do. We're just going to flood. We're going to flood these zones with cops on foot posts that are going to do absolutely nothing. And we're really not going to get to the root causes of why the crimes are actually occurring. We're just going to displace crime rather than seek to get down to the root causes of crime and arrest the actual perpetrators of it. That's what I heard. Like, what'd you hear from that?
Well, that's exactly the crime-fighting apparatus for this administration under Jessica Tisch, and now we see, with Zohran Mamdani being the mayor, the same thing is unfolding, and it's been just a matter of the police department chasing their own tails and chasing after crime. And when you chase shootings and you chase violence, you just create more violence, because ultimately, what she said is when you monitor the gang database, which is such a great tool, it allows you to prevent further violence because you could pinpoint locations of potential retaliation where the next crime may happen. But when you're just mobilizing a patrol presence to follow the crime, you're missing the links of the locations where crime may happen again. And what you're doing, exactly what you said, you're displacing crime so that with the crimes that could be prevented by good precision intrusive police work, by analyzing the locations and zones, and you just mobilize, you're displacing crime, and now you have locations that are missed. So you end up creating more crime by this mobilization tactic. So there's no crime fighting strategy that has actually been effective. So this idea that crime is as all-time lows is a complete lie. That's why we're not looking at the pandemic years because I'm sure, and we've said it numerous times, we're seeing a misrepresentation of crimes, misclassification, also crimes that are not documented, and because it's actually happening. And it's not being addressed through intrusive police work and good casework. Detectives can't do good casework right now because they're bogged down by being part of these mobile field forces. So, again, we still never heard a question about SRG, which is a major issue of topic, especially right now with potential terrorism. We didn't hear anything about SRG because SRG does wear several hats as they combat protest. They're out there controlling crowds, but they're also part of the counterterrorism apparatus. So I'd like to know if SRG is going away, and what about counterterrorism? We didn't hear any questions about that.
Yeah. And Sleepy Joe said, so Impact? And look, mobile field force is completely different than Impact. Impact, they took young rookies and trained them in proactive policing, right? Proactive, intrusive police work, broken windows theory of policing. They brought a whole culture of active cops into the New York City Police Department, and they were trained by active supervisors and active seasoned cops. What mobile field force isn't traditionally that. It's taking the same thing as flooding the zone, but there's zero enforcement being done in those zones. And they're taking seasoned veterans, putting them out on foot posts that aren't going to be active in it. Why? They're first grade homicide detectives. They're intel detectives. They're IAB detectives. They're 15-year cops. Nobody wants to be there. They're just standing around. They're not getting involved. They don't even know the arrest process in the boroughs they're in. They don't know the areas that they're in. They don't know the ins and outs of that neighborhood. And all it is a displacement of crime. So while I think on its face, you could say, yeah, it's somewhat like Impact. It is, just as far as that they're standing on foot posts, but I think it's 100% different than Impact. I do think, maybe we weren't trained properly on how to handle jobs, and we had to learn that, and they had to tone us down when we went into patrol. They had to be like, all right, guys, you got to slow your roll a little bit. You can't be locking everybody up, giving everybody a summons. And we had to be toned down a lot. I still think we were given the basics of police work and Impact, and that infected the police department for years and years to come. And there's still a lot of Impact babies that are out there that are effective in policing. But when mobile field force is really just putting light poles out there, like just recorders and cameras, and it does not have the same effectiveness when it comes to fighting crime as Impact did. Impact legitimately transitioned. You took bad crime neighborhoods over, and they completely transitioned to where they were low crime neighborhoods.
So I think you brought up a great point. I think that Impact was extremely effective, but it had its flaws also. But I think the cops themselves, and I included myself, and maybe if you could speak on it, I felt that we learned by osmosis, right? We were kind of thrown into this environment. You were brought up in this culture of doing intrusive police work, but you were kind of thrown in an environment where you learned actually engaging by osmosis. We did have veteran cops out there to kind of assist you a little bit, but a lot of it was by osmosis. Put in that environment to do intrusive police work, right? You were taught that, and the culture was to do. It wasn't just about a presence. And what we see at the mobile field force, it's just a presence. It's no difference than cardboard cutouts, where we were actually promoted to engage with the community. And so the flaws with that were also, we were pushed to make a lot of arrests. We were pushed to get a lot of summonses. But with that, the byproduct of the osmosis was becoming good cops. And we became very good at being intrusive. We understood case law, and we understood, and we got an ability to make good observations on behavioral indicators, and we became good cops for that reason. Were there flaws with the stop, question, and possibly frisk under People versus DeBoer and Terry versus Ohio? Yes. But in my opinion, the margin of error was far better then than what it is right now. We threw out a giant net, and we caught a lot of bad. Well, let's just say we caught a lot of fish, right? And we caught a lot of big fish. But with that, we did catch a little fish also. We caught some little fish because we threw out this big net. But right now, we're not doing any of this intrusive police work. And I think the margin of error and the amount of crime that's happening out there, the streets are far more dangerous, in complete opposition to what Jessica Tisch is saying. So I don't think Impact was flawless, and I don't think John's saying that either. But I do think Impact was far more effective than what it is now, and it bred cops in comparison to what we see, where some of the cops that were bred from former Mayor Bill de Blasio into the Eric Adams administration, it bred a different culture of cop, where they were much more vulnerable to attacks by persons of interest and perpetrators on the street. And this idea that having good gestures, by hugging kids and giving out ice cream is an effective cop, rather than doing intrusive police work. And that's why we have handcuffs, because when we put people under arrest, we bring them to court, and court's job is to interpret what happened to make the community safer. So they're supposed to work in tandem.
Yeah, so Cop Watch Brooklyn comes out. He says, real talk, the conversations that are being had on this podcast are breaking barriers that have never been broken before. So look, I think, real talk, like we're really just giving our opinions. Like, we might not be right. Someone said, have me on the show. Listen, anybody has a show idea, You want to be a guest on the show, reach out to us, www.thefinestunfiltered.com. If we could squeeze you in the schedule, if it's a good show idea, we'll do it, right? Obviously, we follow the news. On top of that, we bring on retired members of service and other people that are in law enforcement. And between all of that, like when the news cycle dies down or in certain moments, we don't continue on those interviews. Usually Wednesday, we do interviews, right? Today, we said, let's take a break for the holiday. I just got back home. I've been traveling. So probably next week, we're going to start going back onto doing those interviews. But yeah, if you have a show idea, you want to come on, absolutely. We can have conversations. We're not afraid to have conversations about anything. And look, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to be right. Eric's not trying to be right. We're just talking. Marlon's not trying to be right. And that goes for you too, Nin, and I'm pretty sure we invited you on this podcast to go through your thoughts and you cowardly denied so. So, Manny, like I said, hit us up, www.thefinestunfiltered.com. Label out exactly why you'd want to be a guest and any idea you have. And that's not just for Manny, that's for anybody out there. And we'll absolutely entertain it. And we're not afraid to talk on the topic of race. We've talked on it many times on this podcast. We each have our own experiences. Your experiences matter. Whether I agree with you or I don't, doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's your point of view. I didn't live the world through your eyes. You didn't live the world through my eyes. And I think that's what we're all missing today is we're so quick to kill each other. And, oh, that guy's an idiot. I'm never talking to that guy. I'm never hanging out with him. And I've been on podcasts and people have seen it where I've debated people over the topic and they try to use, well, oh, this guy and he said this. So if you don't think that, then you're saying that he's wrong. And I'm like, no, I just don't agree with him. He's entitled to his opinion. He grew up in a different neighborhood, in a different place, to different parents, had a different socioeconomic background and a different point of view than I did. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what it is. Like we need to understand, and Marlon said it perfectly. If you're in the working class of society, I don't give a shit what gender you are. I don't care if you're gay, if you're disabled, if you're white, if you're Catholic, if you're Jewish, if you're Muslim. If you go to work every day and you grow up at either the poverty level or working paycheck to paycheck, or even in the middle class, we're all part of the same hypocrisy. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or anything else. We are part of the same hypocrisy that is going on. And if we can't talk to each other, we're going to be led rather than lead. We're never going to find solutions because what does the government ultimately want from us at this point? They want you dumb and afraid and poor and reliant on them. And that's how they stay in power. That is not the founding of this nation. It is absolutely not. We believe in rugged individualism in America, and that's what makes us significantly different than every other nation on earth. You could be a poor black kid. You could be a poor Italian kid, a poor Jewish kid, a poor Irish kid, a poor Chinese kid, and you could become a billionaire within your generation and set your family up for life. That opportunity still exists here in this country today. And I'm watching a lot of people telling you that is going to disappear, and it's not. The only way it's going to disappear is if we let it happen. We let our kids go out and go to these legal drug places and use this synthetic garbage that they label as marijuana when it's anything but that, right? Marijuana, when it was organic and came from the ground, was illegal. But now that it's synthetic and GMO'd and put in labs, now they want to legalize it. Now that you could OD on it when you never could before, we got to wake up and start having these actual conversations of how we want to live as a society and what we expect for the future. So everybody's welcome. Eric, why don't you end us out, brother?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think the goal is ever to be right. It's not necessarily, I don't say, oh, John's right, I'm right. It's not about that. It's about our life experience through anecdotal experiences and also evidence and fact-based, and doing our research, get as information possible so that we're more knowledgeable. That's why this platform is so unique, because we share information together. You raise a lot of questions, a lot of issues, same here. And I think communication is the most important level of apparatus towards public safety or any form of a good contribution to society. And that's why we even welcomed and we had Jose LaSalle here from Cop Watch, because communication is the key level to compromise. We all have to live in this world together. So it's not about being right. I don't care about being right. What I care about is meeting the truth. And my truth in many ways could be different than someone else's truth. I mean, the world is a different place. I've traveled throughout the entire country. I traveled throughout the world. I've been to rural towns and cities and suburbs in this country where where people just live completely different. I've been to towns where people walk around with guns completely exposed, where there's men all over the place wearing gun belts, and that's normal. That's their environment. In New York City, that would be completely obtuse, but that doesn't make it right or wrong, right? So it's how you live, it's how you perceive the world, and that's what this is about. So we want a respectful platform. So Farley, I think the name is, that wants to come on this platform, contact us. We're always open to having all walks of life. We have expertise. We have people here that give their critical opinion. It's not just cops, right? It's anyone here, your opinion's important. Of course, we'll vet you to make sure that you're going to be respectful. That's what we want to have, a respectful platform. We can have, and I always say opposition meets opportunity. We can have opposing ideas and still meet somewhere in the middle. With that being said, please, I think America is so amazing. John just said it's so true. In America, I do believe you can reinvent and invent yourself several times throughout your lifetime. So especially John and myself, often we're told, oh, you guys are cops. Why are you doing this? Just go live your life. That doesn't mean because you're a cop, that's it. You're labeled as a cop and you can't do anything else. I like to work with my hands. I work on my RV. I do handiwork. I enjoy doing jujitsu. And you know what? We have reinvented ourselves. We went from cops to being podcasters, to being a voice for the police department, being a voice for people, and just having great conversations. So invent yourself constantly in your lifetime. Don't just label yourself as one thing. It's part of your story, not the whole story. With that being said, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of the Finest Unfiltered. We appreciate it. We wish Sal Greco do well on his YouTube channel with his show. And, of course, it's Wednesday night. So, John, what time is the show on tonight? Because I know last night, what time is the show? What time is the show?
We're going to have the executive perspective on tonight, and they're going to be on at 5:05 p.m. Eastern time or 17:05 military time. For some reason, I have that always backwards in my head, and they are going to be talking about Mamdani's first several days in office. And so, I'm excited to hear what they got to say, because I know Ron and Rob do a lot of research, bring in a lot of videos. But yeah, so Mamdani comes out swinging, so that they'll be on tonight. So look, we appreciate everybody on here tonight. We had almost 1,000 people at one point live listening. For those of you that listen in the future, we appreciate it. Please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we did just crack 80,000 subscribers. So thank everybody for that. And yeah, we're going to keep rocking out. We're looking, we want to get to that 100,000 level. And then the next goal after 100,000 is going to be 1 million. So we appreciate you guys.
That's right. That's the whole point, right? The sky's the limit in America. Reinvent and invent yourself constantly. Thank you, everyone. The Finest Unfiltered. Have an awesome day, and check out the executive perspective tonight. Rob and Ron, awesome. And we'll be back Friday for your roundtable. And I know some people asked about Marlon. Took the day off. We'll see Marlon on Friday. Thank you.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?